Hello, I'm Gary YouTube from Cultaholic Wrestling, and we're back once again to do some Gary YouTubing, this time in the form of a big old dirty tier list, like all the famous YouTubers like to do from time to time, where we're going to put every single SummerSlam event from start to finish, from 1988 all the way through until 2026, into this big greasy tier list, ranging from the best to lovely, 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 to all right, to just about bearable, and you want to avoid that bin, but not every SummerSlam will, because we have had a few duds up and down the years. And do not forget, over at patreon.com/cultaholic, if you disagree so passionately with anything I say during this video, I'll do a live stream sometime next week where we re-rank the tier list based on what you tell me. So if you want to shout at me and call me names, patreon.com/cultaholic, and we'll do that live stream there. Right, let's get cracking with the knacking. All the way back at the start, SummerSlam 1988. The one with all the moments is what I've called it. This is the SummerSlam famed for Gorilla Monsoon getting very excited at a pair of lovely lady legs when Elizabeth whaps off her skirt at the end of the match between the Mega Bucks of Andre the Giant and the $1 Million Man versus the Mega Powers of Macho Man Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan, with that crooked, horrible man, Jesse the Body Ventura, as the special guest referee. What a move by Elizabeth, shouts Gorilla Monsoon as she distracts the referee Jesse from his 10 count with Hogan and Macho Man thrown to the outside. That was considered a massive moment back in the day because by and large Elizabeth was a classy lady, and showing a bit of leg was a little bit of from her. How we went from that to WAP in such a short space of time as a human race, I will never know. Elsewhere, the Ultimate Warrior made a shock appearance to end the Honky Tonk Man's record breaking until Gunther came along, of course. IC title reign at 453 days. The story goes they were supposed to be Brutus the Barber Beefcake as the challenger, but he was attacked by Outlaw Ron Bass, so couldn't take part. There's a good little moment in this thing here where a Warrior runs into the ring. He shoots himself off the ropes on the same side where Howard Finkel is getting out of the ring through the ropes, and when Warrior bounces off the ropes, that sends Howard Finkel to the floor, just like Charlie Haas did the Lillian Garcia that time, but with less broken bones and less crying and less screaming. The match ended in 31 seconds because Warrior, of course, but the crowd went wild, so it's got to be considered as a good thing for this card. And interestingly, when it comes to this match, fans who attended WWE's TV tapings the previous week essentially knew what was coming in this match right here. At both the Superstars and Challenge taping sessions, Warrior pinned Honky in untelevised matches to win the IC title so he could appear with the gold when he taped his matches later on that same night, because those matches later on would be airing in September after SummerSlam had already taken place. Then, at the end of both night sets of tapings, it was announced that the belt was being returned to Honky Tonk Man on a technicality because boo bar humbug, but I do like the creativity the company went to there to get around things being shot out of order. Good stuff there, a throwback thing. This show is also known for Rick Rude playing proper mind games by having Jake the Snake's then wife on his tights, her face right on Rick's dick and on his ass on a second pair of tights under his OG pair of tights that he wore for his match against the Junkyard Dog. You see, you think he's getting naked, but no, the second pair of tights are under there, although I would assume that Jake the Snake Roberts would have probably preferred if Rick Rude did get naked in that match rather than having his wife in those sensitive areas. If you like actual wrestling matches that were ahead of their time, there's a couple on this card. The British Bulldogs and the Fabulous Rougeaus went to a 20-limit time limit draw, and then Demolition defeated the Hart Foundation to retain their tag team titles. Of course, for people of a certain vintage, which means old people, of course, this is a bit of a comfort blanket. It was less about the work rate, more about the showmanship, the pageantry, the superstars, the characters, the match finishes, the moments with Liz getting her legs out. So it's not a card that sort of can be compared to anything of the modern day, because obviously now we're about all of that, including work rate, whereas here the work rate wasn't so much of a focal point of their focus. But because of what it was, because of the moments that happened, I think it's quite a nice show to go back and watch. I do think it's aged well. You are thinking, wow, this is what life was back there. They couldn't put on that kind of show today, otherwise everyone, because we're all edgelords now, aren't we? We go, nah, that's rubbish. But for the time period, I think it was a very nice watch. I'm going to kick things off. I'm going to put it in lovely, lovely. It might go down to all right by the end of the tier list video, but for now, lovely, lovely for SummerSlam 1988. SummerSlam 1989 is called the one where there was no holds barred because there was this film, right, which was called No Holds Barred, where ultimately Hulk Hogan beat this bloke called Zeus at Things. And because of this loss, Zeus had to come to the WWF and avenge this loss, and thusly the main event of SummerSlam was made, where Hogan teamed with his friend Brutus the Barber Beefcake to face Zeus and Macho Man Randy Savage. And apparently, in this match, the not very experienced worker Zeus might start getting a bit stiff with Hogan and with Brutai, brother Brutai of course, so to make him calm down and potentially giggle at the same time, the faces would say, "Free James Brown" in his ear, and that would make him stop slapping their faces off for real. So that's a good little tidbit, isn't it? The great moments in the show include Ultimate Warrior defeating Rick Rude for the Intercontinental Championship, which went over 15 minutes by the way, and didn't poo the bed. Up the Rick Rude. What a worker he was. The Brainbusters had a fantastic tag team match with the Hart Foundation, a match where Jim and Brett were so upset about the creative here, they left before the show was over and paid for their own flights home, nearly quitting the company completely before seeing sense, I guess, and coming back. I mean, could you imagine how different the 1990s would have been as an entire decade if they followed through with what they were doing there? Nothing to do with their underpants. Anyway, could you imagine how different that would have been? The Fabulous Rougeaus and Rick Martel versus Tito Santana and the Rockers was a good time for a 6-man tag team match. And one of the great bloopers in wrestling history happens here because Mean Gene Okerlund is interviewing Rick Rude and the sign falls off the wall behind them. This causes Mean Gene to shout, "F it!" They reshoot it, obviously because they can't put the expletive one in the show itself, but whoever was in charge, let's blame Kevin Dunn all the way back then. They put the sweary version in the show, and I think that's a good thing because it is, as I say, one of the great wrestling bloopers of all time. So there were some highlights on this show, but we were way down on iconic moments compared to the year before, and the show really was dragged down, I think, by the main event, because why does Zeus have to lose in the films and then come into the wrestling and do that kind of thing there? I get, obviously, cross-promotion stuff, but think about the fans, damn it! That's all I'm going to say. This one can't be getting too high on the list. I do think it's not bin-worthy, but I don't think it's anything to shout home about, so just about bearable seems right for 1989. SummerSlam 1990 was the one with the disappointing finishes. On paper, this show should have been good with another Warrior and Rick Rude match, this time inside of a steel cage, Hogan versus Earthquake, and Randy Savage versus Dusty Rhodes, baby. But the matches just didn't stand or deliver like NXT does each and every year, and the finishes held the show back somewhat. And the stuff just went awry, we'll get onto in a bit. That didn't help the card either, but there was also the book. I think the booking's the main issue with this SummerSlam. So let's get on to that now. Hulk Hogan won via countout, which should never be happening at the alleged biggest party of the summer. I know it wasn't called that back then, but you've said it now for more recent SummerSlams, which means it applies, in my mind at least, to the older ones as well. Only 4 pay-per-views back then, so this felt like a bit of a cop-out by Vinnie Mac and his booking friends. Then Warrior makes a big comeback during the cage match against Rick Rude, so Rick's on top for a while. Warrior makes a comeback. Atomic drop for Bobby the Brain Heenan. Press slam for Rude. Warrior takes an age to get over the top rope to the floor because he's doing Mr. Whippy, as we called it during football training back in the day, while you warm up your hip flexors by, you know, making your hips do that. The Nikki Bella without the twist, if you want to call it that. But he's doing that on the way down to take the piss out of Rick Rude. A good moment there, but he did take a while to get over the top, which was like, just get to the floor. You're meant to win the match, bloody hell. But it was a crowd popping moment as well, so it worked on that count. Even down the card in the opening match, things weren't going right because Shawn Michaels of the Rockers was out there with an injury, so he couldn't really do what he would normally do in their loss to Power and Glory. And the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich, replaced Brutus Beefcake in the IC title match against Mr. Perfect, pretty close to the card starting due to that horrible jet ski incident Brutai went through. We've seen that episode of Dark Side of the Ring. Horrifying stuff, so no wonder he was taken off the card and replaced by the Texas Tornado. But by a mile, the best thing on the card was the Hart Foundation's win against Demolition in their 2 out of 3 falls match for the WWE Tag Team titles, following interference from the Legion of Doom. But outside of that, we are properly struggling for things to shout about back in this. I'm stuttering because I can't believe I'm about to say what I'm about to say. Right, we'll say it now. We did get to see one white man buy a black lady from another white man, because apparently 1990 was actually somewhere around 1860 in WWF land at the time, because $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase purchase sapphire from Dusty Road, baby. And the less said about that, the better. So yes, not a good show at all in its execution, and certain circumstances that didn't help it that was going on around the show, like Shawn Michaels' injury and stuff like that. This is not worth going back and watching at all. Obviously, questionable angle as well. I reckon we're going somewhere like the bin. We're in the bin for the first time on this tier list. So there we go, 1990, deservedly so, in the bin. SummerSlam 1991 is, of course, the one with the wedding, one of the most iconic SummerSlam moments of all time. But also with this show, the backstage stuff was probably more interesting than anything we saw on the card. There was a big cloud heading into this show following Hulk Hogan's appearance on the Arsenio Hall show. Amidst all of the accusation of steroid use around the WWE and its superstars at the time, Hogan was on that show saying, "I don't use anabolic steroids, brother, but if you ask me while I'm under oath, in about 3 years' time, I'll tell you I did." So there you go, a little bit of controversy heading into the show. And this was also the show where Warrior attempted to hold up Vince McMahon for a lot of money, which worked until it didn't, because shortly arriving backstage after the main event, Warrior was handed a note that was penned personally by Vince McMahon himself that day, essentially telling Warrior that he was suspended and go the F home. This was because the previous month before SummerSlam, Warrior wrote a letter to McMahon threatening to no-show the event if he did not receive due back pay to the tune. And remember, this is 1991. Back pay of $550,000, as well as a pay rise to the scale of what Hulk Hogan was earning at the time, which in layman's terms was biblical money. McMahon acquiesced in the short term, accepting Warrior's demands and giving him what he wanted, even writing a soothing, friendly response that acknowledged Warrior as a valued star in the World Wrestling Federation at the time. But in reality, Vince was stringing Warrior along just to make sure he made that scheduled SummerSlam match. But then once the match is finished, Warrior comes through back through the curtain. He's given that note from Vince McMahon, and he's basically told to go home. So Vince saved himself a little bit of money. Warrior got something, but not everything he wanted, and it all ended well. The iconic in-ring stuff we go to now, though, and this was, of course, the one with the wedding between the Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth. This main event of the show, so not even wrestling, main event at SummerSlam 1991. It didn't end well, of course, and I don't mean because the pair would shoot divorce in real life in 1992, but this was because Savage and Elizabeth's reception was ruined by The Undertaker and Jake the Snake Roberts. Jake scaring Elizabeth with his snake, not his trouser snake, his actual real-life python. Python? Big butt, whatever kind of snake. I'm not a zoo man. Anyway, and then Taker attacked Macho Man with the urn to make it all go a little bit Pete Tong. The show's tagline billed the wedding as a match made in heaven, while the show's biggest bout was tagged a match made in hell, as Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior convincingly saw off Sergeant Slaughter, Colonel Mustafa, and General Adnan. Another example of America wins back in 1991 off the back of what was happening in real life with wars and such. It was a good crowd-popping moment for the crowd inside the arena, but when you go back and watch it in 2026, it doesn't hold up well like the initial SummerSlam did, in my money at least. It was very slow, it was very plodding. That's not because of Hogan or Warrior. It's because of who they were working. They were very limited by that point in their respective careers, and that reflected in what we saw during that match. The best match on the card, though, was the Intercontinental title match between Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect, which saw Bret win his first singles championship in WWE in a technical masterclass, as you would expect from those two. And another feel-good moment on the card saw Virgil defeat Ted DiBiase for the $1 Million Championship. And then we have the story of the Mountie, who was put in real jail by the big boss man, as it was inferred that things happened to the Mountie while he was inside that cell, because while he's in that cell, we see this on the show, by the way, a big biker lad, a big strapping biker fellow walks up to the Mountie who's just been put in the cell, and he says, "Hi, don't you love the way leather feels against your body?" So yes, that's a thing that happened, yeah. So yeah, the backstage stuff, more interesting than the in-ring stuff. There was an iconic moment on the card, of course, with the marriage that closed the show. One great match, lots of matches that people weren't talking about, and of course, the Mountie stuff was just weird looking back on in 2026. I do think it goes low down, but not as low down as the bin. I think just about bearable. It's just about right there, despite the efforts of Mr. Perfect and Bret Hart. I'm gone. short-term memory loss there already. But there we go, 1991, just about bearable. SummerSlam 1992, the one with Brett wrestling a broom. 11 matches took place on this card for the live crowd in the arena, or stadium I should say, Wembley Stadium, but only 8 aired in America. So Americans, you missed out on great bouts like Tatanka versus the Berserker and Tito Santana versus Papa Shango, or a 6-man tag match featuring Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Bushwhackers taking on the Mountie and the Nasty Boys. So in reality, you didn't miss out on much, to be fair. Speaking of iconic moments like 1991 show closer, we've got to talk about Bulldog winning the main event in front of his home country people inside Wembley Stadium, even though he was absolutely bollocksed during the bout itself due to what I'll call shenanigans with Jim Neidhart that apparently went on for the weeks before SummerSlam 1992 took place. Up the Bret Hart. We know how great Bret Hart is, but this is like the proof that he's a wrestling wizard, essentially taking a big lump of meat to a classic match with a classic ending. The big SummerSlam match count-out trope was becoming firmed up by 1992 as Randy Savage and the Ultimate Warrior clashed over the WWF title, with Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect stirring up trouble on the outside for much of the contest. Warrior, the challenger of course, he won via count-out after 28 minutes of action. Quite frankly, we've got to say about that. Why is a DQ count-out screwy finish becoming such a trope at SummerSlam? More on that to come in future SummerSlams. In more count-out news on this card, by the way, Shawn Michaels and Rick Martel fought over Sensational Sherry and her massive thong, and in the process, they got each other counted out as well. If you don't believe me, it's the biggest thong I've ever seen. Apparently, Cisco, that's the reason he wrote that song, is because of Sensational Sherry's thong. 7 years before that song came out. Might be 8, might be 9, I don't know. And of course, we can't speak about SummerSlam 1992 without doffing the old cap to that kid on the outside of the stadium. We're watching the promo package at the start of the show. Look at how much fun these fans are having in London town at SummerSlam 1992. And this kid just threatens the Bulldog by saying, the Bulldog is going to win whether he wants to or not. With this weird, like, hybrid American Manchester, whatever accent, an iconic moment all the same. And of course, we've got to speak about Nails. He beats Virgil by submission in a match that lasted 3 minutes and 55 seconds. And Nails' only pay-per-view singles match this was, by the way. But he would go on to moan at Vince McMahon for being paid somewhere in the region of $9,000 for 3 minutes and 55 seconds of wrestling. This culminated a few months later with an attack from Nails on Vince backstage, where several wrestlers had to stop Nails turning himself into the Scranton Strangler with his paws around Vince's neck. The setting, the finish to the main event, the puppets with a Legion of Doom, Kamala running away from Undertaker after yet another SummerSlam DQ finish, all of it iconic. SummerSlam 1992, I'm sure you will agree, has got to go in the best tier, as I'm sorry, editor, but I've made a right mess there. The tier is on the move. But SummerSlam, it's probably not going to be the best of all time, but it's in the conversation of one of the iconic, but also one of the best shows from top to bottom, up the Wembley Stadium. SummerSlam 1993, the one where Lex acted like he had just won the title when he didn't. The Lex Express ends here. It ends its journey at SummerSlam 1993. It's Yokozuna versus Lex Luger for the title. In the main event, Luger wins via countout, and because he didn't win the title, he obviously doesn't win the title. But watching the show, you'd have thought he did win the title because there's confetti. The entire roster's coming down. He's celebrating like he's not only won the title, but he's broken several world records. He's found the cure for several terminal diseases. All the bells and whistles are here for a man who had one goal heading into SummerSlam via the Lex Express over many months before SummerSlam took place, and he didn't achieve that goal. It was very weird and very, very just... I've seen this about 5 times now, maybe even more. I've got no words for it. It makes no sense whatsoever. And the best thing about it all, we go from that moment, which makes no sense at all, into one of the corniest music videos wrestling any media has ever produced ever, because it all goes away one day. And we're seeing happy kids, footage of them, JFK, a bored-looking a bored-looking Lex on a bus, easy for me to say, all in the name of America. It was all very weird and it made no sense whatsoever. And normally on these cards, a crap main event can be propped up by some good stuff on the undercard. But that doesn't happen here either, as we saw a WrestleMania 9 rematch in the form of Undertaker versus Giant Gonzalez in a rest in peace match where there was no DQ, but there must be a decisive winner. Undertaker, because of course Giant Gonzalez is just too long for Undertaker to hit his tombstone piledriver. He wins with a big lariato off the top rope. Obviously, Giant Gonzalez standing in the middle of the ring. But it's after the match where we got to go once again, because teeny tiny Harvey Whippleman, he was associated with Giant Gonzalez all the way back when. So they sort of fall out. Giant Gonzalez, he just has to give this tiny little man, comparatively to him, just a big old dirty choke slam. See you later, Harvey Whippleman. You deserve that because you are a bastard. But you're thinking it couldn't be an easier thing. Just a big choke slam to a tiny man from a big man. But if you think about Undertaker versus Hulk Hogan at Judgment Day 2002, where Hogan allegedly sandbagged The Undertaker, I'm not saying Harvey Whippleman did that. I just don't think Giant Gonzalez was very strong. So it's like he even made a mess of that one. Such an easy spot to do, you would think, but he made a mess of it all the same. So that was bad. And then we go from that to everyone's favorite Nazi Ludwig Borger getting a squash match victory over Marty Jannetty. That was a pay-per-view match all the way back in 1993, the biggest party of the summer, let's not forget. Shawn Michaels versus Mr. Perfect for the IC title was the baton taker and the passer-honorer this year for the big match with the SummerSlam count-out finish, as Perfect was too concerned with Diesel at ringside, and then things just went awry from there. Why must they do this so much at SummerSlam? But if you like it, there's more of that to come. And then we see Bret Hart versus Doink the Clown, followed by Bret Hart versus Jerry the King Lawler. The King versus the Hart, with the 3.5 minute sharpshooter at the end. So one match sort of bled into the other. Obviously, Jerry the King Lawler and Bret Hart at loggerheads at this point. Apparently, something had gone wrong with Jerry the King Lawler and a crutch in the build to this match. So a 3.5 minute sharpshooter was Bret's receipt for taking a crutch shot that was probably a bit too hard, or harder than it was intended to be. But yeah, the referee then reversed the decision after that sharpshooter was held on for way too long, because it was, you can't, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through the 3.5 minutes. So it was some good heel bollocks there, a little bit of a throwback finish. I very much enjoyed it because I like that sort of campy stuff from the 70s working its way into more modern times, if you can call 1993 modern times by this point. But you know what I'm trying to say there. It's working its way through the generation, so I enjoyed that bit there. But this is not a good show by any metric. There's very few redeemable features on this card. Obviously, Mr. Perfect and Shawn Michaels until the DQ finish. The traditional SummerSlam DQ finish, or count-out finish. That was good stuff indeed, but it's bin worthy. Let's just stick it in the bin. 1993, straight in the bin with you. Didn't make any sense. SummerSlam 1994 now, the one with The Undertaker and Underfaker. Did you know that Justin Credible got hired by WWE off the back of his work training with Brian Lee, who portrayed The Underfaker ahead of this match? Now you know. How you know when Andrade asks you? Ross told you, because someone else told Ross. Yes, this was the show that was Undertaker versus Underfaker, a match that could have had one of the greatest finishes of all time in professional wrestling history, because the original pitch for this one was for a bit of a light show to happen. Undertaker facing Underfaker stood up in the center of the ring at the end of the night. Then the lights go down, and when they come back up, Mark Calloway's Undertaker is stood all alone, and the commentary team were going to put over the fact that Mark Calloway's Undertaker had absorbed the powers of the fake Undertaker. So he's twice as powerful as he was before the match was going to take place. What we missed out on, it just made... it would have been great. It would have been crap, but also... I like crap things in wrestling. I like laughing at wrestling because there's people fighting in their underwear. There's people pretending to fight in their underwear, so we can laugh at certain things, and that thing would have been fantastic for my money. But instead, we got about 12 tombstones, and an Underfaker was put in a big casket, the casket or the coffin, whatever you want to call it. It was taken backstage. It was opened by Leslie Nielsen off of the films, who was promoting The Naked Gun around this time, but nothing was inside the coffin by the time it was wheeled backstage and Leslie lifted the lid. But because there was a golden suitcase close by, Leslie gets to say the line, "Case closed," as the show goes off the air. Fantastic stuff there. I can't believe Leslie Nielsen signed up for that one. While this show might have been all about the search for the real Undertaker, Bruce Hart was there. Woo! Says nobody apart from Bruce Hart himself. He tried to make it all about himself like he always does. Bruce Hart is a pathetic man. Bruce Hart is on this card because it's Bret Hart versus Owen Hart, which, by the way, is one of the best steel cage matches of all time. A proper classic. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. I fully recommend. But the end, when the Harts, the entire Hart family, who are not Owen and Bret, so there's stuff happening in the ring, the entire Hart family try and get in the cage to stop these nefarious things happening. But Bruce, just keep your eyes on Bruce. He thinks he's the star. He thinks everyone's paid their money to see Bruce Hart. Well, no one knows what he is. That's just Bret Hart's brother. That's Owen Hart's brother. He was doing this all the way through in 2010 with the stuff with Vince McMahon. Never changed, Bruce, you weird guy. Razor versus Diesel is also on this card in a really solid 15-minute affair, which is a very good thing indeed. And Alundra Blaze versus Bull Nakano. It didn't hit the heights you'd think it would do with those two involved, but let's remember, it's WWF 1994, so we've got to give it a thumbs up because it made it onto the card in the first place. And believe me, for 1994, that's progress, because there was a few years there where they didn't even bother with women's wrestling, and now we're here with two GOATs of the game going at it on this card. It was supposed to be elsewhere. Jeff Jarrett versus Doink the Clown, which would have been a very good match, I think, because they are two very good workers. Big fan of Doink the Clown and his work back then. An evil clown, what's not to like? But Jeff was replaced by Mabel, and I saw in my research for this tier list a shoot interview with Mabel himself, and even he didn't have an answer as to why he replaced Jeff Jarrett. He just did, and he didn't know why. So this was a strange SummerSlam because outside of Undertaker versus Underfaker and other things on the card like Bruce Hart, it felt like to me watching it back, they put all of their eggs in the wrong basket. Yes, it was all about finding the real Undertaker and Undertaker versus Underfaker, but surely they should have put all their eggs in the Hart versus Hart cage match. A few duds in there as well. I think that there was some decent stuff, as I mentioned there. Razor versus Diesel stands the test of time. It's like a proper American wrestling kind of main event style of match. So I think all right. I think all right for 1994. If not lovely, lovely. It might be by the end of the tier. We could move it up. We could move 88 down. I think 94 is just about right for where we are in the tier. SummerSlam 1995, the one with the ladder match. It's kind of a one-match card because Mabel versus Diesel is your main event of the evening. We were down bad at this point in WWE history. For my money, the worst main event in SummerSlam history. This one has to be it. Yes, you could say the Nexus, just in terms of pure result in 2010, but this one, result, match, everything. This is the worst one of all time, and it wasn't helped by the fact that Mabel injured Big Daddy Cool during the match, but not enough that the champion couldn't finish the entire thing and then retain his title after 9 minutes of absolute pish. As I mentioned earlier, it's a one-match card. It's Razor versus Shawn Michaels in another ladder match, where we do see Shawn Michaels throw a bit of a temper tantrum towards the end, which threatened to mar things a little bit because his ladder basically started shooting on him, and that does happen from time to time in these ladder matches. But outside of that, a very, very good match, especially when you consider that Vince McMahon told these lads they couldn't use the ladder as a weapon. They couldn't pick it up and hit the other guy with it. But Triple H, that bastion of wrestling knowledge, he pointed out the lads could still use it for an Irish whip, and how steel steps are used at the ringside area for a no DQ while using a big foreign object while in a wrestling match. You know what I mean? So the fact that they had that kind of stipulation put on them, and the fact they still produced what they did do, that is one of the greatest ladder matches of all time for my money. More good things for this card come in the form of Barry Horowitz. I believe in Barry. Barry Horowitz defeats Skip from the Body Donners in a really solid match for the time period, obviously because Barry is the biggest jobber we've ever seen in all of our lives. Limbs are all over the place when Barry gets his big win. Brett versus Isaac Yankem is also on this card, as is Undertaker versus Kama Mustafa. They were both fine, but nothing to write home about. I mean, if your people even write home about anything to do with wrestling at all, that'd be weird. Hello, ma'am. Hope you're well. I saw a good wrestling match. That'd be strange, wouldn't it? Anyway, let's move on. Not a SummerSlam for the ages, but the undercard just about props up the main event to stop it being a complete dud. It's remembered solely for the ladder match between Razor and Shawn, and because of that, and you got to think that some SummerSlams have had nothing, like 1990 had nothing, 1993 had nothing. This one's got something, so it can't be in the bin, so it can't be too high. I'm going to go just about bearable. I don't order these tiers near the bottom. We will decipher, of course, at the end of the tier list which SummerSlam is the best of all time, but I think just about bearable, that is where 1995 belongs. SummerSlam 1996 we go to now, the one with the Boiler Room Brawl, I've christened it. Yes, it's off to the Boiler Room we go, as we see Mankind falling off a ladder and doing himself a nooses in some form of sciatica thing, as he was supposed to land on some boxes, but his ass and his legs, they land on the solid concrete floor instead, and that's got to hurt a bit more than it otherwise would have, you would assume. The match kind of set the standard for the more hardcore style we'd see incorporated in the WWF during its Attitude Era, as well as the fact they were copying some things that ECW were doing at the time, but less about that, the better, of course, in terms of Vince McMahon and all of his creative genius and all that malarkey. But still, this match was kind of a watershed moment, and because we hadn't seen too many matches of this ilk, you could tell they were trying to iron out some kinks in terms of how it was shot and where the action was going and how it was all pieced together. So it is a bit clumsy when you go back and watch it, but then again, it is breaking new ground, so we can't be too harsh on this match whatsoever. It's iconic all the same. You hear Undertaker, you hear Mankind, you hear Boiler Room, you know exactly what event we're talking about. So it has really, I don't know if it's stood the test of time, but it's traveled the test of time. And this was a night for the bad guys, even though Razor Ramon didn't even go here by this point in 1996, as he was off in WCW, as the heels went over in 6 of the 8 matches on the card, which is a travesty for the alleged biggest party of the summer. Next up, we've got to speak about poor old Vader when it comes to SummerSlam 1996. He's on the up and up in the company, massive reputation, great career to this point in Japan, in WCW and elsewhere as well, and apparently on the house shows leading into SummerSlam 1996, he's working Shawn Michaels in matches. He's pulling Shawn's hair. Shawn's threatening him backstage. They're at loggerheads before they even go to the ring for realsies, let alone in storyline. And this, of course, is the match where on SummerSlam 1996, Shawn Michaels is going for what I still assume is his big elbow drop, which he was famous for up and down his career. Vader's meant to move. Vader doesn't move. Shawn lands on his feet. He bends over in such an unprofessional, petty, bitchy way, but it is quite nice to watch back on because there is something nice about a petty, bitchy man, isn't there? And he just shouts, "Move!" right in Vader's face as Vader is on the mat down below. A horrible moment for Vader. This, of course, resulted in the Survivor Series match a few months later being changed from Shawn versus Vader to Shawn versus Big Sid, where Sid got such a pop in MSG. It was fantastic to see. And this is kind of where Vader's proper main event level push in the WWE ended as a result of what was happening here with Shawn Michaels. So that was a massive shame because I was a big fan of Vader. Everyone was. How can you not like a big man like that? A big meaty man doing a moonsault and a gimp mask. What's not to love? Elsewhere on the card, though, poor old Vader. We see Jake the Snake Roberts versus Jerry the King Lawler. And this is a feud that's centered around Jake the Snake's substance abuse issues, which WWE always handled it really tastefully. I couldn't even get that out right because I don't believe it to be true. I was being sarcastic there. The New Rockers are on this card. You might be asking, who the bloody hell are they? Marty Jannetty and Al Snow. They were the New Rockers, so we don't need to talk about them anymore. Mark Merrow's Wild Thing makes an appearance, not Sable, not his penis, but the Shooting Star Press in 1996 WWF. Groundbreaking stuff for the time period and a big plus point for this card. But outside of the Boiler Room Brawl and Michaels and Vader, the rest of the matches didn't hit the heights they might have, but still, New Rockers. What more do you want? You can't ask for too much on a SummerSlam card. So yes, it can't go too high. It's largely remembered for the wrong reasons outside of the Boiler Room Brawl. Not the best, not even lovely. I think it goes somewhere in all right. Or is it just about better? I'll go bottom of all right. Bottom of all right we'll go to. SummerSlam 1997 we move on to now. Yes, of course, this is the show with Stone Cold Steve Austin breaking his neck in that match with Owen Hart. The pile driver was just way too low. We don't need to go through that. You've seen it a million times. I have no doubt about that. But obviously, full credit to Austin. He had to win the match because the stipulation of the match, you couldn't write this. He's broke his neck, but he has to win the match because if he doesn't, could you imagine in the middle of 1997, Stone Cold Steve Austin having to kiss Owen Hart's arse? That was the stipulation on the match, so Stone Cold had to win. He said it himself in interviews, "It's the worst roll-up of all time, burger." But fair play to him for obviously going through with that and obviously coming back from a devastating injury like that neck breaking. Horrible stuff to see. Remember, for the wrong reasons. It would see Austin change his style when he came back, of course. He couldn't do the more technical stuff. He was more of a brawler. I guess you could say that kind of worked in his favor, but obviously the ramifications in terms of bringing his career, his in-ring career at least, to an end earlier than it would have done, that's where it all kind of started. started. Some earmarked this show, though, as the start of the Attitude Era because of the chair shot Shawn Michaels delivers to The Undertaker's head at the end of the show. He hit Taker so hard, you might be thinking Shawn was pissed off at something. And this might be because Shawn Michaels was the special guest referee for Undertaker versus Bret Hart. And this meant that because Bret was going over, that Shawn Michaels had to count the fall. And I don't know if you've heard this before, but Shawn Michaels wasn't too fond of Bret Hart and vice versa. So there was little wonder that while doing the pinfall, Michaels was looking at Bret like a python would look at a small pig. If you know, you know. If you don't, the word I'm looking for is menacingly. The Legion of Doom versus the Godwins is on this card, and that's a thing that happened. And that was largely setting the tone for the undercard that didn't deliver, but also didn't poo the bed. So in the context of some of the SummerSlams we've already talked about, and some of the SummerSlams we'll talk about towards the end of the video, we've got to take that. That's not necessarily a bad thing. They were just there. It was an all right time to watch, but you're not going to go, Mother, I've seen this match that you need to go and watch. Mankind and Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Triple H to you and I, they had a distinctly forgettable cage match as well, so it wasn't quite like, it just happened. This was like, oh, this should be quite good, but it just didn't hit the heights you thought it would do. And this card was also the scene for Bulldog, the British Bulldog, versus Ken Shamrock for the European title, where Bulldog retained via disqualification up the SummerSlam screwy finish after Ken Shamrock hit him in the head with a can of dog food. Yes, 2019 SmackDown actually started in 1997. Bulldog had just gotten a fistful of dog food slapped into Ken's face, and then Ken threw several men around the ring, including the Stooges of Briscoe and Pat Patterson. And this is the last time they did that kind of thing, I think, as the story goes at least, because Ken was so rough, and they were getting on a bit. You know, they must have been in their 50s each at that period of time, maybe even in their early 60s. I don't know how old they were at the time. Basically, Ken was too rough for them, and they were like, that's enough for us. And so going forwards for this kind of thing where wrestling needs to look menacing and people need to fall and make this wrestler look even tougher than he already is, indie wrestlers were brought in for one night only deals. So yes, this was a bit of a two-match show. Slightly better than 1996, and we're looking things as the wrestling savants that we are. I think it's got to go somewhere in all-right tier. I don't think it's just about getting a lovely, lovely tier, because as I say, that undercard was fine, but there was nothing really sort of like standing out to go like, yes, that belongs on a good SummerSlam card. So I think all right is just about all white, as that guy said on that TV show all the way back in the 90s. What was he called? It'll be all white on the night. Whatever. Up the English TV. I don't know why I'm out. SummerSlam 1998, the one with Triple H and The Rock on a ladder. This is the show that featured one of the best SummerSlam matches ever. Two pretenders to the main event scene at this time, where you can just tell this is their coming out party of sorts. Hello, Vince McMahon. We're pretenders to the main event scene, but you can trust us to carry this company forward, especially when Stone Cold Steve Austin is out with a massive injury. It's also the kind of match that, especially I guess more so for The Rock, when he became a bona fide main eventer, you wouldn't really see him do this kind of thing from time to time. Obviously, Triple H in the year 2000 with Cactus Jack / Mick Foley, he was having Hell in the Cells and that match at the Royal Rumble, so he was doing this kind of thing. But yes, I guess for The Rock, this was a dying breed for him, so to see him in a ladder match, and a good ladder match as well, was very nice indeed. It was over the IC title, and as I mentioned earlier on, one of the great ladder matches, one of the great SummerSlam matches of all time. This was the highway to hell between Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker, and I reckon Austin by this point must be thinking, never again SummerSlam, I hate you. It never ends well when I'm here, because after the broken neck in 1997, he then gets knocked out at this event in the Garden, the Square Garden of Madison. After Undertaker went from bent over to standing up, the back of Taker's head catches Stone Cold right in the jaw, and Stone Cold gets knocked out. And you can't really tell, to be fair to Stone Cold Steve Austin. He battles through. The pair have a very competent match from there on out, but I love the story that Austin's just taking that blow to the jaw. He's lying on the floor. He's looking up at referee Earl Hebner saying, Earl, where the hell am I? What? And then Earl looks down and says, you're in the garden, baby. Good story there. I don't know what Earl Hebner sounds like. Anyway, we move on. Jeff Jarrett gets his hair cut out this show after a loss to X-Pac. I think they were going to go for the full shave, but because it was pro wrestling, and no doubt Jeff was like, oh my, I can't lose all my locks, by God. We say the Clippers were kind of bust, so some of Jeff's blushes, they were spared. Edge had one of his first big pay-per-view matches as he teamed with Sable to defeat Mark Mero and Jacqueline in a decent little mixed tag team match. Considering Sable was involved in a wrestling capacity, it was probably better than it probably would have been when you think about Sable in wrestling matches. The night's other big stipulation was the infamous Lion's Den match. several lions, one den. Not several dens and one lion. The Lions Den match between Ken Shamrock and Owen Hart, which sounds ludicrous on paper, but was actually quite fun in a weird and I wouldn't normally watch this kind of thing, but they've done it. The cage was tiny and it was quite limiting for the lads to do big things in it, but they managed to put on a very, very unique experience for all who watch. So unique, I guess, that they brought it back in future SummerSlams to come. And yes, the setting for this one of one of the great SummerSlam big matches is MSG. It's the ladder match between Triple H and The Rock. It's a big thing. It did well to recover from the setback of Stone Cold Steve Austin getting that thing in the head from The Undertaker. A nice variety of stipulations with the Lions Den thrown in there as well. It's a fun show to go back and watch today. I did go back and watch the full show in preparation for this tier list, so I think we're going... It'll be towards the bottom of the top, but I think it's one of the best SummerSlams of all time. Top tier for 1998. SummerSlam 1999 was remembered as being the one with Jesse the Body. Yes, Jesse the Body Ventura was back in WWE because this show took place in Minnesota, and he's the ref for Austin versus Triple H versus Mankind, where Mankind would get the big dub here, but he'd lose the title to Triple H on Raw the next night, fueling speculation at the time that Austin didn't want to do the job to Triple H at this time. What do you think about those rumors? Let me know in the comments down below. But while we're here, mentioning Jesse's involvement in the show, so the tag team of Val Venus and The Godfather was initially booked to be on this show, but because of Jesse's involvement and his political things, the WWF were forced to remove the porn star and the pimp tag team and pretend they didn't exist, which is an interesting one when apparently, I researched this, I saw this on my thingy, on my Google thingy. Jesse was an advocate for the legalization of prostitution, so surely that tag team would have been right up his street. Or maybe not. Maybe he hated The Godfather. Down with the pimps. Anyway, didn't expect to say that today. Undertaker and Big Show took on Kane and X-Pac. A really fun match which showcased how ahead of his time Sean Waltman was. Obviously, a massive star at the 90s, but because it was the land of the giants back then. He looked so small, I think he stood around 6'1". He was easily 15, 20 years too soon as the business evolved. He surely would have been a top star if he was coming around in the mid to late 10s, I guess we could say. A fantastic fun match, because obviously they're three massive lads. Sean in comparison is not, but he still fits in there and doesn't carry the match, but he holds his own in the match, and it's a good time for all who watched it. Then we also see the match of the night, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's true. Love Her or Leave Her street fight between Shane O'Mac and Test. The match stipulation is horrible. We have to say that if Shane lost, he was forced to give his blessings to Stephanie and Test, who were shagging at the time, but Shane wasn't too on board with that, obviously, because it's his sister. But if Test had lost, him and Stephanie would have been forced to break up and never see each other again. But the match was far better than the stipulation, probably gave it any right to be. The match of the night, as I did say there, and Shane had to give his blessings because he did lose the match. My goodness me. But this is the... When people see me go mad about Shane McMahon between sort of 2016 and 2022, this is the Shane McMahon I remember when I was a child. He'd come in, no expectations, held back by stipulations, held back by bigger, more fancier matches on the card. He'd do something massive, he'd go home, then have another undercard feud which would entertain and thrill and horrify in equal measure. So yes, up the Shane McMahon from this time period. It was then the Battle of Deborah on the show as she walked out at the start with Jeff Jarrett, who wasn't being very nice to her and her puppies. This is what they were saying at the time. So she walked backstage and Jeff Jarrett was facing D'Lo Brown. So Deborah re-emerged with D'Lo Brown as he won. He walked out with the Eurocontinental titles. He was the European champion and the Intercontinental champion at the time. Jarrett won the match, but kept the IC title, but gave the European championship to Mark Henry, who won the match basically for Jeff by interfering on his behalf against D'Lo Brown. How do you put the European championship over? You have Jeff Jarrett give it to somebody else because he can't be arsed. Then we have The Rock defeating King of the Ring winner Billy Gunn in their Kiss My Ass match. There's this poor lady who's involved, who she's brought into the arena by Billy Gunn under a blanket so we don't see who it is. We whap her off. She's a bit of a heavier set lady, I think it's fair to say. And the culmination of the match, Kiss My Ass, of course, she's forced to raise up her skirt. So we see her ripped pantyhose and panties. And obviously Jerry the King's going, oh, look at the state of that. It's terrible. Billy Gunn goes to throw The Rock face first into the ass, but instead, Mr. Ass is then, obviously, it's reversed. He's thrown in there and then goes on to lose the match as he continues to look like a cock with everything he did with The Rock in 1999. Bowie! If you know, you know. That's what Rock called him, if you don't know. It's a wild card that also featured the return of the Lion's Den as Ken Shamrock beat Steve Blackman in there, but this time it was a weaponized Lion's Den match. I think this was, outside of that kiss my ass stuff, a very, very good watch. Not top tier, but I'm certainly going to go lovely, lovely, lovely for 1999. Because you think about 99, obviously everyone goes, Attitude Era, the best time in the business. Some of the pay-per-views in terms of like a wrestling content like perspective, they were crap. So the fact that we got one in 1999 that was objectively a fun watch, apart from that bit, because I felt sorry for the lass involved there, but still, 1999, lovely, lovely, lovely. SummerSlam 2000 now, the one with Kane's naked face. Yes, this show had a couple of real low points, but enough real high points to make those low points not even really matter. Like Undertaker versus Kane was a high point for me, because the match, it wasn't good, but when was Undertaker versus Kane in a singles match ever good? I defy you to tell me when that happened, because you can't. For whatever reason, they never meshed while doing the wrestling in a singles capacity, but it's saved by the moment, because Undertaker basically just targets the mask. It's a pretty short match, but it's all about Undertaker trying to get Kane's mask off his face. He rips it for a bit. You're thinking, oh, we can see forehead, but then Kane's busted open, so the blood covers the exposed skin. But then he does like, does the Undertaker with two hands. The mask comes off. Kane does the hair flip when he gets on the floor. So picture a 8-year-old Ross going into school. I saw SummerSlam a little bit after, obviously it happened on the Sunday night. I might have seen it, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever it was. And I was going around telling my friends that Kane was portrayed by Chris Benoit, because I thought that Kane, go back and watch SummerSlam 2000, right? Kane, when he goes like that and you see like the panda eye makeup that he's got on to make it look like burned skin, I guess, he looks a little bit like Chris Benoit with a beard and long hair. So there you go. That lost me all my friends at school. That's a true story. But still, it was a good moment because it was the first time we saw Kane's exposed face. But it was still done the way it was just like, I've not quite seen it. His skin looks all right. What's going on? Ooh. But this was the show also known for Shane McMahon's fall with style. Like Woody from Toy Story. Off the side of the Tron in his match against Steve Blackman with Test. Going radio rental on the floor while Shane was landing on his back from a great height. As I mentioned earlier, this is my Shane McMahon. Middle of the card match with low expectations, do something massive, steal the show, go home. Fantastic stuff from Shane. This is also the site of TLC 1, where the lads were told to be spectacular but safe by, you'll never guess it, Shane McMahon. And he definitely didn't want the lads to take any shine off his spot, which happened just a couple of matches before on that same card. So everyone's like, "Wow, can you believe Shane McMahon?" And then TLC 1 happens. So that's him definitely going, "Lads, be good, but don't be too good," so people forget my spot. Then it's the Battle of the Chris's as Jericho and Benoit, another Benoit mentioned on the tier list there, happens in a 2 out of 3 falls match, obviously because they were two good workers, we can say that. Obviously things happen with Benoit, which makes that mean nothing, but he was still a good wrestler, a wrestler that still makes me go, ugh, when I see him come out for his entrance, but then you watch the match, it's like, oh, he was good, but also a horrible, horrible bastard, and he deserves to rot in hell. But still, the match, 2 out of 3 falls, a good one. Then we see The Rock, Triple H and Kurt Angle clash in a huge triple threat match, remembered for that pedigree bump Kurt Angle takes where he goes through the table, but the table kind of breaks before Triple H is pushing off, so he smashes his head off the floor. It's a horrible watch. It didn't derail things too much, which is obviously a testament to how much of a fantastic set of ring generals Triple H and The Rock were and are, I guess, still today. Rocky retains his title come the end of the match. Even if you go right to the bottom of the card, Right to Censor versus Too Cool was a fun way to start the night. This is the match where we see on paper a very convoluted match, but it does make sense when you go and watch it back, because Chyna wins the IC title because she pinned Trish Stratus in a tag team match that involved Eddie Guerrero teaming with Chyna up against Val Venis and Trish Stratus. Val Venis was the Intercontinental Champion in the match, but the fact that Chyna won by pinning Trish, who was on the team of Val, that meant Chyna took the IC title. I imagine Val kicked off backstage saying, "I'm not losing to a woman." That's me just assuming things there. But that's the finish they came up with, and I thought that was a creative way to do it. And when you watch it, I thought it worked. And you can tell we're working our way down the card now in terms of quality, because we also saw Taz. It's Taz and Jerry Lawler, because Taz had smashed a car window into the face of Jim Ross. So Jim Ross is all battered and bruised in the eye. And this was the sort of get your own back match for JR. Obviously, JR isn't a wrestler. He did have matches around this time and a few years later for that matter. But Jerry the King Lawler fighting on behalf of his friend, and it was a jar of sweeties, another glass thing that JR smashes into the face of Taz. A great moment there, because JR just makes you feel things. You take that, Taz, you son of a bitch. He was fantastic at that. But the match itself, before the sweetie jar moment, was a little bit meh. And then we had the Cat versus Terry in a stink face match. Because the Year 2000, why the hell not? A mixed bag, but enough high points to make it one of the best SummerSlams of all time for me. I think it's solidly in the top tier. Maybe not the best of all time, but certainly one of the best of all time. So SummerSlam 2000, the top tier for you. Now we have SummerSlam 2001, the one with the deliberate DQ, I'm calling it, and he would be forgiven for thinking this show was a bit crap because it happened in the middle of the invasion angle, which of course remains one of the biggest what-ifs in professional wrestling history, but this show absolutely slapped my players. Stone Cold Steve Austin brings back the SummerSlam special, easy for me to say, the SummerSlam special of a bollocks finish as the heel, as Stone Cold was at this point, gets himself deliberately disqualified in his the semi-main event against Kurt Angle. It worked though, because the heat, Kurt Angle's very intense during the entrances, Stone Cold's very intense during their entrances, and also the sort of order of the card made it work as well, because this wasn't the main event, as I mentioned there. The main event was The Rock sending the crowd home happy when he captured the WC title from Booker T. But Austin's knocking down referees left, right, and center, and then WCW official Nick Patrick comes down, DQs Austin, so Angle gets the win, but Stone Cold crucially keeps the title because they were invading lads, and they were very clever. The match that happened before the finish is in the conversation for one of, I think, the best main event matches of all time. Obviously, it's got a little bit of an asterisk next to it because it was 2001 and the business has evolved in terms of work rate stuff. But you go back and look at the star power, the sort of spectacle of the thing, the action. Two lads making you think it's real. That's the main thing about it. Like Stone Cold and Kurt Angle's intensity was palpable through the screen. One of the best matches I think I've ever seen, quite frankly, before that finish. But I do understand why they did that finish. I don't think... It is one of the SummerSlam bollocks finishes, but it doesn't fall into the same category as other SummerSlam bollocks finishes we've talked about earlier on in this video. Because, of course, remember, we are still trying to keep Stone Cold Steve Austin heel in the months after WrestleMania 17, as the entire world, it felt like, wanted to cheer Stone Cold. So this is what they were trying to do, and I can see why they did it. Elsewhere on this card, RVD and Jeff Hardy had a ladder match that absolutely humped, as you would expect with those two involved. Fantastic stuff. Rhino with Stephanie McMahon in his corner, and Chris Jericho. They had a great match, but it was hampered a little bit because Jericho got concussed apparently off a big gore by Rhino, but he still managed to finish the match because that was the mantra back then. Injuries be damned. Let's finish the match, but it was a good time all the same. Lance Storm and Edge had an underrated humper at the opening of this card. I'm using that word a lot right now, aren't I? For Lance's IC title won by Edge. Also, this card featured X-Pac versus Tajiri in a winner-takes-all match for the light heavyweight and cruiserweight titles, which saw, of course, the cruiserweight title eat the light heavyweight title. A good match there as well. Yes, there's no complaints here from me. SummerSlam is starting to get on one hell of a roll because I think 2001, like 2000, is one of the best SummerSlams of all time. Big high moments for sure. As I mentioned there, one of the best matches I've ever seen with my own eyes. And this is all despite the fact that it included the match involving Undertaker and DDP revolving around their the old stalker angle, which I did not like at all because it made no sense whatsoever when you look at Undertaker's wife and DDP's wife, with all due respect. But one of the best SummerSlams of all time. SummerSlam 2002 now is the one with the comeback match. And yes, I might as well just do it straight away. 2002 goes straight into the conversation as the best SummerSlam match of all time. This one is famed, I guess, first and foremost for the return of Shawn Michaels to the ring after that back injury that cost him 4 years of his career. Michaels is back to avenge his old best pal Triple H, who attacked him in the car park. Enhance! Enhance! Oh my God, it's Triple H. You know that segment. If you've seen it, if you don't, it's worth watching because it's so stupid. It's very funny. But it's one hell of a spectacle, the street fight is. The blood that's on show is fantastic. It really adds to the sort of mood and the sort of tension between the two. Triple H getting his heat back after eating the L. Jim Ross on the call. He always made those Triple H moments even better than they already were because Triple H delivers this sledgehammer shot to the back of Shawn Michaels, and just the laugh he's doing with the blood going down his face, and Michaels obviously coming back from a back injury. Jim Ross adding to that entire thing. Lovely professional wrestling, one of the highlights of the show, or any SummerSlam for that matter. I love that match. Then we have what I believe to be the greatest SummerSlam opener of all time. Maybe not like the greatest. It is the greatest SummerSlam opener. I'm going to go for it. It's under 10 minutes, but it's frantic. Like Rey Mysterio starts the match from behind Kurt Angle. That's how frantic it is. And they go on and just have an absolute fantastic just wrestling match. Just all the wrestling. Two contrasting styles, of course, but two workers who could work the boots off of anybody who's ever laced up a pair of boots. It's up there with Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 33 in terms of under 10-minute matches, but I think this is one of the greatest. Is it the greatest show opening match of all time? It's in the conversation. Let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. This was also the site of Brock Lesnar smashing The Rock, the next big thing, Brock Lesnar, of course. This wasn't a proper squash match in terms of, this is the terminology for a squash match, but it was very comfortable for Brock Lesnar as a new star was solidified here by overcoming the established star, much like Brock Lesnar, as we're sat here in 2026, has just done the honors for Obafemi. It's worth mentioning that The Rock, by the way, in this match, which is unthinkable at the time, he was getting booed because he was off for the films, and the fact he was leaving us wrestling fans for the films, who does he think he is? Working in a field that doesn't hurt his body as much for what I assume was more money. Would he have got more money for the Tooth Fairy than he would have done? Or this, I guess it was Scorpion King sort of time, wasn't it? Anyway, that's besides the point. Brock Lesnar and Rock, a good time was had because a new star was solidified. He was already a star, but it was solidified as a main event player. Edge and Eddie Guerrero and Benoit versus RVD in the mid... Sorry, Edge and Eddie Guerrero was a singles match. Can't read my own notes there. And Benoit versus RVD is in the mid card because this is 2002. So here we are 1 year removed, kind of, from the invasion angle. So this is where the roster has never been this stacked. So you get matches like Benoit versus RVD and Edge versus Eddie Guerrero in the mid-card because why the hell not? And you also get matches like Chris Jericho versus Ric Flair, with Ric Flair going over via figure 4. And the story goes around this match because, of course, in 2002, we've heard the stories how heading into WrestleMania against The Undertaker that Rick was so low on confidence and not believing that he was the nature boy, that he just didn't want to do the wrestling anymore. And people like Triple H had to really sort of coax him out of this, like, oh, I'm down on my luck. I'm Ric Flair. I don't believe I can still do it. Undertaker brought out of him a little bit, but then he was pitched the finish here, which was a figure 4 win over Chris Jericho. And apparently Rick said, that doesn't make any sense for me to be Chris Jericho. But then Jericho, to his credit, said, you're Ric Flair. Just slap it on me, father. And they did that finish there. And it was a good time all the same. Also, a shout out to Christian and Lance Storm versus Booker T and Goldust, which was very, very entertaining as well. A stacked SummerSlam, one of the best of all time, if not the best of all time. Top tier, no questions asked. SummerSlam 2003, the one with Goldberg winning. LOL JK. Yes, we've done a LOL JK in 2026. So, the story goes that Goldberg arrived in WWE the night after WrestleMania 19, interfering in Rock Appreciation Night. Then after seeing off The Rock at No Way Out, Christian in a steel cage, Rodney Mack in what was called, actually I've not made this up, an open white boy challenge where Goldberg gets on the ropes and screams, white boy! Fantastic scenes there. Goldberg also sees off Randy Orton and more, but he gets to Elimination Chamber. He dominates the match, eliminates so many people, but then Triple H turns into Michael Jackson. Billy G is not my champion, said Triple H, because we get it's so demoralizing, especially in 2003, putting yourself back in that mindset, because this was when I was properly getting into wrestling. This is when I'm 10 years of age, going on 11 years of age, watching wrestling week to week, and like just Triple H winning all the time, especially when Goldberg was primed so well to win the big gold title here, but Triple H is like, no, you stay down there, Bill, you tit. It was so demoralizing. And I guess it depends your viewpoint on SummerSlam 2003, how much that finish ruined your evening. Because before that, it was a pretty good card. I mean, Is it just me who thinks the cycling shorts makes it worse? I know Triple H, he can't help that his groins were playing havoc. So he had to wear the cycling shorts to keep his groins in, basically. Keep them in line. But the sight of those cycling shorts, it made it even worse than it would have been if Triple H was looking like normal Triple H. Anyway, less about that because it was a bollocks-booking decision. Elsewhere, Brock Lesnar was made to tap out by Kurt Angle while Angle was nursing a torn hamstring. My goodness me. So first and foremost, Brock Lesnar tapping out. Yes, this is before the UFC run, so maybe it doesn't mean quite as much, but still, this is Brock Lesnar tapping out on a WWE show. It was a big thing. Kurt Angle was wrestling on the tour of Japan just before SummerSlam and tore his hamstring, as I mentioned there. You can't tell. The pain-killing injections that man must have been going through could have killed a horse, I would assume, because how you go through a torn hamstring to wrestle in that kind of match against Brock Lesnar is incredible. It isn't as good as the Iron Man match. It isn't as good as the Mania match, obviously with the asterisk there of Brock Lesnar making a mess of himself off that shooting star press, but still, it's a very, very good match indeed. And I can't believe Kurt Angle did that, learning about the injury he had going into that match there. The four-way for the United States title with Eddie Guerrero defending against Benoit, Rhino, and Tajiri was also a very, very good time. And then we see the silly bollocks comes in. My Shane McMahon comes back in because he's facing Eric Bischoff, and it might scream tragic on paper because you can just imagine Bischoff doing the because he was a karate black belt, you know. But Steve Austin gets involved. It was a very good time. It didn't outstay its welcome. That's my Shane McMahon. That's my Shane McMahon. And then we see Kane versus Rob Van Dam in the semi-main event of the evening because it was the first time we'd seen Kane with a naked head just about. Kane removed his mask a month or two prior. He'd been on Raw with a towel on his head, then the chokeslam on Bischoff, and now we're here facing RVD at SummerSlam 2003. The match I thought was better than it had any right to be because Kane wasn't known as a worker, but I think heading into 2003 and 2004 in terms of match quality, I know he did a lot of hardcore stuff, but Kane was never better than he was here. He always looked impressive, but the wrestling action, I think he peaked in 03-04 kind of time for my money. Let me know what you think about that hot take in the comments down below. It was a wild one, this one. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, it depends how much that finish of Triple H stealing the title from Goldberg, how much that brings it down in your opinion. So the fact that happened for my money, because I'm a Goldberg boy, he got me into wrestling, I don't think it can be considered one of the best SummerSlams of all time. But I do think by the end of the video, I'll settle for a position low down on Lovely, Lovely, Lovely. So we'll settle for that one. Low down, Lovely, Lovely. SummerSlam 03. Lost to like lots of variation, but also the crushing disappointment of the Reign of Terror getting in the way of Goldberg. This is before Goldberg was old Berg. SummerSlam 2004 now, which of course is the one with Randy Orton winning the vacant heavyweight title. This is a show with Randy Orton in his peach trunks becoming the youngest world champion in WWE history. A moment that will be replayed until until time ends, really. But of course, Chris Benoit's involved. They can't tell us what happened, why it happened, the circumstances around it. For obvious reasons, Chris has ruined Randy's crowning moment. That's the most important thing to take away from what happened in 2007. But as I mentioned there, a solid match. Obviously, Chris Benoit putting over the new up-and-comer. But does a solid match mean anything now when you're talking about Chris Benoit? I don't know about that. But yeah, the moment was ruined by what happened elsewhere a few years later. So less about that, the better. A good moment for Orton. Nice trunks, peach trunks, lovely colour scheme. But elsewhere on the card, till death do us part between Kane and Matt Hardy, where Lita would have to marry the winner, which of course was Kane. 2004. Feels like a very, very, very long time ago reading that one out there. Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero did the colossal tussle once again, but it didn't live up to the previous matches between the pair. Like they're epic. They're massive epic, I was about to say there. They're epic at WrestleMania 20, which is solely because I guess the match didn't pale in comparison there. The bar was set too high there. How do you replicate that kind of thing again? Still a very, very good match, but not quite as good as what they'd produced previously. The traditional SummerSlam DQ finish is back for JBL versus The Undertaker and the Limo, as JBL got himself deliberately DQ to keep his title. The Limo obviously was parked on the aisleway there. JBL makes his entrance in the Limo. Horns, all that malarkey. You know how it goes. So we go for the spot at the end of the match. So JBL's got himself deliberately disqualified. Undertaker, JBL, JBL gets slammed on sort of like the bonnet or the hood of the limo. His legs go into the glass windscreen or the windshield, and the cracks and breaks it. There's blood everywhere now. And then you can see there's a slit in the top of the roof of the limo, because obviously when Undertaker choke slams JBL onto the limo, he's meant to go through it, and obviously that wouldn't happen if it was just a sheet of metal. Obviously, bells and whistles, professional wrestling hides the secrets, like that magician that time who doesn't tell you how he does his tricks. But there was a fan who hopped onto the limo and almost got to that bit of the roof, which nearly ruined the entire spot for both lads involved. So thankfully, that one didn't happen. It was a great moment. Undertaker looked fantastic there. His hair getting a bit longer by this point in 2004. So he was looking a bit like himself, like he used to before he cut his hair, as old Booger Red. This undercard also featured good stuff like the beginning of the Best of 5 series for the United States title between Booker T and John Cena. Toronto fans, this show was held in Toronto. They booed their hometown boy-ish. I know he's hometown-ish, but their homeboy Edge. He was a good guy now. He was defending his IC title against Chris Jericho and Batista in a triple threat match. He retained it. Just about brought the crowd around by the match's end, but for his entrance, it was very mixed indeed. And then we saw 14 minutes of Eugene versus Triple H, which exceeded all expectations. I mean, we have no expectations for a Eugene match, but still, against Triple H, it was very good indeed. And because we're here speaking about SummerSlam 2004, we've got to talk about Diva Dodgeball. This was a shoot dodgeball fight, pitting the Diva Search contestants against the bona fide WWE Divas in a dodgeball match, which was done for realsies. The match result brought about backstage ramifications, because by the time all the actual proper WWE Divas were out, there was 5 Diva Search ladies left, and this got the actual Divas some heat backstage because it made the company look weak or something like that. Remember, this was a dodgeball match, not like a fight. They're wrestlers at the end of the day, not dodgeballers. So wrestlers' court was had backstage with Triple H as the judge, Val Venus as the prosecutor, and Ivory acting on behalf of the defense. Silly times. Again, it's dodgeball. It doesn't matter that much. Who cares if you look weak at dodgeball? If they were fighting and looking weak, that's different. But I guess it's a sign of the times, isn't it? 2004 is very, very different to anything we've seen really since about 2014 onwards. So yeah, 10 years later, I imagine nothing happens. But you know, that's what it was back then. It's aged like milk. Plenty of good stuff on this card, though. Nothing close to a SummerSlam classic, in my opinion, so it can't be too high, but it's still a good, varied card. So somewhere in the upper middle for me. Obviously, the Benoit thing ruins it a bit, doesn't it? But I'll go all right. All right for SummerSlam 2004. Not as good as SummerSlam 2003, but still somewhere in the middle there, I think, is fair. SummerSlam 2005 I have called the one with the overselling. Yes, this is the strangest edition of SummerSlam to date. You simply can't believe some of the matches you're watching, such as Kurt Angle getting Eugene's greatest ever match out of him. In all fairness, we know that Eugene Nick Dinsmore was a good worker, but he was saddled with this gimmick, which is aged like milk. But for this match here, he put the gimmick to one side and just showed us that under the gimmick, there was a very, very good professional wrestler in there. And against Kurt Angle, he had a good chance of having the best match of his career, and he did just that. Then we move on to the bollocks, the proper bollocks, the custody of Dominic ladder match, because you don't go to court to settle these kind of things, you wrestle a match. Where the F is Vicky? You've heard about this one a million times as well. Such an entertaining watch to go back and watch it. I hadn't seen it for a fair few years. I'm going to sneeze in a minute. Elephant, 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 and the sneeze has just about gone. But yes, this match was such an entertaining watch. Going back and watch it, even when the stuff was going wrong with Vicky Guerrero not being where she should have been by the match's end. Fantastic stuff. Bollocks, but a good kind of wrestling bollocks, which obviously Dom Mysterio has taken on in his career, where he is now an over 20-year veteran in the squared circle because of this match here. And you see politics got in the way of Shawn Michaels and Hulk Hogan. Shawn Michaels making an absolute mockery of Hulk Hogan's offense during their match, which I think was worth the price of admission alone. And they were supposed to have a series of matches. It was all laid out. It was all agreed upon. The story goes that Terry said, that doesn't work for me, brother, after he'd won the first one, I think. So Shawn was like, well, if you're going to do that, I'm going to make you like a tit with the world watching. And it was absolutely sensational. Hogan with egg on his face. Michaels being a charismatic, petty dick like he was in the 90s. It was a nice throwback for Shawn Michaels, and I very much enjoyed watching that one back after not seeing it for a fair few years. Then the bollocks continues because Edge versus Matt Hardy is on this card, and this one is weird because it ended after just less than 5 minutes. Booked that way, by the way. There was no accident. There was no too much blood spillage or anything like that because there was a lot of blood in this match here. But Edge comes out on top when fans were gagging for Matt Hardy to win because Matt Hardy was let go. Then he was brought back in a shoot fashion when all this news about Edge and Lita's affair broke out and all that malarkey. So he's brought back. You think that getting Edge in this kind of situation, the right thing to do was have Matt Hardy go over because the crowd were gagging for it. Edge was public enemy number one because how do you steal another man's woman? I guess is the story here. But there's something about the finish that just makes me think it's Vince McMahon going, you are a weak man, Matt Hardy, for losing your lady to another man who works in your workplace. That's what I was thinking there, because how can you have Matt Hardy lose in such a short space of time after all that had gone on? It was a stoppage as well, by the way. So it wasn't the right thing to do, I don't think, and I think it really hampered the match as a result. The most normal match of the night was the WWE title match between John Cena and Chris Jericho. They pretty much just had a good, solid 14-minute main event match. Jericho had told Vince McMahon he was leaving the company following the match and he wanted to do something big on the way out, so they put on the Rockstar versus the Rapper feud. It wasn't very good, was it? But then again, Chris Jericho would come back in a couple of years' time and do some good stuff, go away again, then come back again and do some more good stuff after that. So he had a very good career to Chris Jericho after this one wrapped itself up. Randy Orton beat The Undertaker after a fan got the ring, but that fan turned out to be Cowboy Bob Orton in a mask, and it was great stuff from there on out. Going back and watching that as a man and not an angry teenage boy, Bob Orton was fantastic in this feud. Hepatitis C aside, of course. We've got to say that one. Chris Benoit opens the card here, beating Orlando Jordan in about 30 seconds to win the US title, I do believe. It was fine. Orlando Jordan was a heel, part of the cabinet, of course, with JBL, so that was a good time for all concerned. And this show is also kind of a story of what might have been, as the story goes that Muhammad Hassan was going to win the title from Batista, but then WWE booked that angle on SmackDown with the terrorists and The Undertaker, and it aired around the time of the London bombings, and ramifications were had from that. So it's such a shame for Muhammad Hassan. I'm not saying it's such a shame that that didn't happen, because we don't need terrorists in wrestling. It's wrestling, for goodness sake. But it's such a shame that just at the whims of the booker's pencil, Muhammad Hassan's run wasn't what it might have been. But such is the business, I guess. And that's just a really severe case of the booker's pencil being really harsh on a particular kind of wrestler. But yeah, a memorable one. Doesn't mean it's good. In fact, I don't think it's very good at all. It can't be. Shawn Michaels keeps it out the bin for me. And Kurt Angle and Eugene was good as well. But I think it's just about bearable. Again, these lower tiers aren't ordered anyway. They're just in the tiers. I don't think SummerSlam 05 was a good one. Dom, no, that's a bit harsh. I'm going to go up there. All right. Because I enjoy that kind of, you know me, I enjoy that stupid kind of wrestling. Like Dom, custody of a Dom ladder match and it going wrong. And Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels was great here. Up to Shawn Michaels. He's good at wrestling as Shawn Michaels. SummerSlam 2006 now, the one with Hulk Hogan's last ever WWE match. Yes, it's Hulk Hogan versus 26-year-old Randy Orton. But of course, and I don't want to come across as too cynical, everybody, but I imagine that doesn't work for me, brother, was said by Hulk Hogan in the build-up to this match, which resulted in him getting the win. And I'm being quite cynical for a good reason, because Hogan actually missed the go-home Raw for this show because of an issue with his meniscus, which apparently happened when he stood up too fast off the sofa. That's a real story that's out there. Old age does not sound fun. The match was even more of a sarcastically great one because Hogan even had it restarted because he kicks out at 2.999, even though the ref, whose final word it normally is in the professional wrestling or anything else that has a referee really, he counts to 3, but Hulk's like, no, you can't do that. The match is restarted. Hulk up, leg drop, 1, 2, 3. You know how that one goes. Edge defeats John Cena in Cena's hometown because Vince McMahon used to love to do that to people in their hometowns, especially when Jim Ross went back to Oklahoma. His life was absolutely ruined each and every time. But the match was a bit silly because the stipulation was that if Edge got DQ'd, he'd lose the title. But despite that, Lita tries to get involved so many times, and you'd think if the referee sees you get involved, Lita, your boyfriend will get disqualified and he'll lose the title. So stop doing that, Lita, you pest. The finish was good. Professional wrestling healing by Edge, though, because he hit Cena in the back with a set of brass knuckles to get the win. Shane, Vince, and 100 different heels failed to take down D-Generation X, which on paper sounds a bit naff, because I assume when you think about these names, you think about God and that feud. But this was, I thought it was a very, very good time. A very, very fun watch. No notes there. A fun watch where the heels couldn't get the job done. Fair enough. Good time was had by all. But the match of the night, surprisingly, when you consider the history about these two, because there was a period of time where Mick Foley and Ric Flair didn't get along because of some disparaging remarks Ric Flair said about Mick Foley. But they have the match of the night. Heel Mick Foley went up against Flair, who could not be booed by this point of his career. Flair won this I Quit match by threatening to hit Melina with a foreign object. And Mick, if you go back and read one of Mick's books, he waxes lyrical about Melina for a long time. And yeah, Melina was at the center of this one, on the brink of being killed by Ric Flair, and that was too much for Foley, so he says, I quit. The show did have a couple of duds, which looked good on paper, notably the World Heavyweight title match between Batista and Booker T, which ended in DQ. The SummerSlam DQ finish is back, and Big Show versus Sabu for the ECW World title. But there is a good reason, going back to Booker T versus Batista, why that was maybe not as good as it could have been, because during the filming of the commercial for this year's SummerSlam, this is where Booker T and Batista had their big fight, where, by all accounts, Booker T got the better of the animal. Oh yeah, man! You wouldn't expect that, would you? Just looking at the size of the muscles, I would assume the animal to get the better of Booker T, but it wasn't. Booker T got that dog in him. A couple of highlights, a couple of lowlights, a couple of silly lights, and things happened. I think this is just about, if you balance the scales, a middle-of-the-road SummerSlam. So we're going to put it in all right tier. But then I have to move down? No, I'm not going to keep 2005 there because it was stupid. 2005 stays there. 2006, all right as well. A bit more of a safe show. SummerSlam 2007 next, the one with the first of many matches between two men is what I've called this show. This is the one where the Jackass lads were meant to be involved after their exploits with Umaga on Raw, where Chris Pontius and Steve-O wouldn't stay down and make Umaga's offense look class, so he beat the piss out of them, and because of that, and because of the Chris Benoit situation apparently, and obviously the Jackass lads doing things that, you know, hurt your head and maybe have damage that we can't see. That kind of thing. Apparently the PR surrounding that, and obviously the company and professional wrestling as a whole in general being jagged through the mud because of the Benoit situation. They were dropped from the show, and whatever was meant to happen didn't happen. But what did happen, this was the scene of the first singles match on pay-per-view between John Cena and Randy Orton. Their matches could be another tier list all of their own, as we all know. This was the highlight of the show for many people, including me, with Cena beating Orton to remain the WWE champion following a 21-minute entertaining clash between two of the top stars of the day. It's a good match, a good solid match. Obviously the first time we saw this on pay-per-view, so obviously a bit later on in the feud we're like, oh, we're doing this again, we know what we're going to see, and they had to try and think of creative ways to get around that sort of stale, that sameness, the sameness of the two same people doing the wrestling for so long. So yeah, this was just a straight down good wrestling match, and I guess this is where the good stuff on the show kind of ends, because the great Khali brings back the SummerSlam screwy finish by getting himself DQ'd and retaining his World Heavyweight title against Batista after a slog of a match where Batista tried to do things but couldn't do anything really against a massive chicken leg oaf. I feel harsh in saying that. I love the great Khali, but not maybe for the right reasons. But this finish sapped the energy out of the crowd big time because nobody was buying the great Khali as champion. They tried to end the show, or this segment of the show, I should say, on a bit of a happy note with Batista standing tall, but the damage was already done because everyone wanted Batista to take the title from the great Khali, but he couldn't get that done. So the segment was lost. The second the 3 count was made. Triple H returned after several months out of action, and the game went on to defeat the ever-entertaining King Booker. The match was weird because it was sort of like, it felt like a warm-up match for Triple H after such a long time out injured, but Booker T was pretty hot. Oh yeah, man. Shocky ducky quack quack, Cholula Green, man. He was hot. His King Bookie was doing very entertaining things. But when you think about the context of WrestleMania 19, that's the thing that popped in my head watching it back. It was like, there's so many more people on the roster who could have had this match for Triple H. I get why I had to be on SummerSlam because Triple H returning to the ring. That's probably a pay-per-view worthy thing all by itself. But there were so many more people who could have had this not competitive match against Triple H. But I guess there could be more backstage reason behind the decision to do this one because Booker T, as the story goes, was about to go on a 60-day suspension for the online pharmacy thingy-majiggy after the Benoit thingy-majiggy happened. But then he was like, I'm not being suspended. That's not for me. I'll just leave the company completely. And off he went to TNA a short while later. John Morrison versus CM Punk for the ECW title was a good time indeed, even though there were obviously the circumstances around that one because that's where Chris Benoit would have been involved. Kane versus Finlay. All right. Rey Mysterio versus Chavo Guerrero. Umaga versus Mr. Kennedy versus Carlito for the IC Championship. All fine matches, but not memorable matches. Not matches where you go, I can hang my hat on that as a good pay-per-view match. So yes, in the end, it turns out to be a bit of a one-match card. It's not a bad show by any stretch of the imagination. There was just nothing to really get you out of your seat while you're watching it. It's a weird one. It's an all right time, but I think it's just about bearable. That makes no sense whatsoever. I don't think it's as good as 2006 or 2005 as the tier list starts shooting on me. There you go. We're in there. He's in. 2007, just about bearable. But we'll go towards the top. I'll order that one because that seems too disrespectful because there was that Cena versus Orton match there. But yeah, 2007, just about bearable. SummerSlam 2008 now, the one with Shawn Michaels' wife getting punched in the face. This was the first show of the PG era, but you would not know that based off what we saw on this card. So yes, first and foremost, the wife of Shawn Michaels, Rebecca, gets hit in the face by Chris Jericho because this isn't soft play where you send your babies while you sit there and have a coffee and go, thank God for that. I don't have to take care of them for 20 minutes. Oh my God, they're going to jump off that and break their neck. Yes, it's not soft play. And I say that because ballet does hurt their feet, right? Up the ballet dancers. When people say this isn't ballet, it's professional wrestling. Ballet dancing hurts, right? I assume. I've never done it, but the pictures of the feet look horrible. That's not me saying I've been searching for feet pictures of ballet dancers, by the way. I just remember someone saying that and going, oh, you should look at pictures of ballet dancers' feet. It does actually hurt them. And I did search it because of that. And no, I'm just digging a hole here anyway. Yeah, but Chris Jericho mistakenly catches Shawn Michaels' wife. Ballet dancer's feet got me in a tizzy now. He catches Shawn Michaels' wife for realsies. Her lip is swelling up. They go backstage. Jericho is like, oh my God, I've just hit Shawn Michaels' wife in the face for realsies when I didn't mean to. He asks if she's okay, and she replies, is that all you got? Shawn Michaels' wife is really hard. So continuing the not PG stuff. On the first PG pay-per-view, Edge and Undertaker had that Hell in a Cell match with the memorable ending of Edge being sent straight to hell via that chokeslam off the ladder and the flames coming up from the ring with the cameras changing and Kevin Dunn getting all fancy with the cutaways and whatnot. Taker, by the way, in the match portion of the match, used a camera, a one-man concerto, so the camera that was from the cameraman inside the bop. He used that camera. He didn't go like and the flash blinded Edge. He used the camera, the big HD cameras, to bop Edge on the head. A one-man concerto and a tombstone finished the actual match. PG rating, apparently. I'd say that's pretty gnarly, bros. Oh, Jesus Christ. Edge was planned to take a tombstone off the top of the cell in this one, but for obvious reasons, thinking about Mick Foley, they didn't do that, and that's probably for the best. John Cena and Batista had a match that didn't last long, but it was a throwback in terms of big, muscly men clobbering the poo out of each other. I really was a big fan of that match, and I was also a fan of CM Punk versus JBL. Not quite as good as Cena versus Batista for my money, but it was still throwback in its nature, and it made SummerSlam the biggest party of the summer once again. And then Triple H got potentially Carly's best pay-per-view singles match out of him because he is cerebral, and when Triple H is on, to be fair to him, there's a lot to say about Triple H, but when he was on as a professional wrestler, there was very few better than him, and he guided Great Khali to probably his best singles match of his entire WWE career. So this was a really solid, if unspectacular, edition of Survivor Series, of SummerSlam. We've only been here for a couple of hours now, haven't we? Talking about SummerSlam, and I've just said Survivor Series. This was probably the best SummerSlam since 2003, so it's got to go above. 2004, 5, 6, and 7. So we're already talking about at least all right tier or above. But it also included Glamourella, which of course was Santino and Beth Phoenix taking on Kofi Kingston and Mickie James, and Matt Hardy versus Mark Henry. They kind of bring the card down. I do think it was a very solid tier. It's either top of all right or bottom of lovely. I'm going to go bottom of lovely for 2008 because that stuff they did in Hell in a Cell, creative. Some people might not like the cutaway kind of stuff they were doing with Undertaker after the match portion of the match where he's attacking Edge and send him down straight to hell. Obviously the angle with Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels' wife. Very noteworthy indeed, but yes, a good SummerSlam. SummerSlam 2009, the one called Summerfest by Jeremy Piven, where the good outweighed the bad on this mixed bag of a professional wrestling show. The good, first of all, though, Jeff Hardy and CM Punk had a great main event in a TLC ladder match. A TLC ladder match? A TLC match. All three things are involved, not just the ladder. CM Punk won the match, but then he's attacked, because he was a heel at this time, he was attacked by Undertaker after the bell. But then on the SmackDown after this show, this is where Jeff Hardy was like, bye, and then didn't come back to WWE for 7.5 years. So this was a monumental period of time for Jeff Hardy and his relationship with the WWE. Dolph Ziggler and Rey Mysterio was an absolute banger, a great match between the pair. The near fall sequences down the stretch was proper edge of the seat stuff. Fantastic. Yeah, I'm thinking about it on the fly. This opened the cards. It's going to be up there with Rey Mysterio versus Kurt Angle in terms of the greatest SummerSlam openers of all time from 2002. That Angle Mysterio one was, of course. Then we see DX versus Legacy. You probably think, normal tag team match. The Legacy lads get a bit in and then DX win. But this was actually excellent. A very, very good match. And then we have Cena versus Orton 10 take place on this card, if you do count their one outing in OSVW in 2002 against each other. So their 9th WWE match, their 10th overall. Another plus point on the card up until the finish, where there were 2 restarts, and then Bret DiBiase helps Randy Orton retain the title. Not Ted DiBiase, not even Ted DiBiase Jr. or Ted DiBiase Sr., because Jr. would make the most sense there because of legacy. Bret DiBiase comes in, who launches himself at the referee while Orton's locked in the STF. You think it's over, but then Bret attacks the ref, and it's not over. And another low point of the show, on paper, should have been good in Christian versus William Regal for Captain Charisma's ECW title, but the match was over in 8 seconds because Regal is trying to take his ring entrance jacket off. He gets tied up. Christian just hits the kill switch to give it its more modern name. And that's how he won. Looked so silly. Should have been a lot more than that. Bar humbug indeed. But there was plenty of good stuff on this show. But in some instances, like the John Cena and Randy Orton finish, it felt like they were trying to be too clever for their own good. The Regal finish as well. I do think they detracted from the show somewhat, because you watch back, especially the Cena versus Randy Orton portion. When they get the second restart, then there's a fan in the ring who nobody recognizes. Everyone's like, what the hell is going on here? Obviously, Cena's standing there looking forlorn, and the fans are a bit like not making noise, going like, oh, this is a travesty. They're a bit like, oh, what's going on here? So I do think they dragged the show down a little bit. But I do think it's around about 08. I'm going to go... I don't think I put any lower than 2008 tier, so I'll go for lovely, lovely, lovely because of mainly that CM Punk versus Jeff Hardy match, which is a match of the ages. SummerSlam 2010 now, the one with the wrong winner. Yes, this is the show that should have seen the Nexus cement themselves as a top act in the company after vanquishing Team WWE in the main event of the night. Wade Barrett has explained publicly now how the Nexus found out they were going to lose the match just before the show was going to start, because they were all told in the build-up to the show they were going to win. And then someone backstage told him, hey Wade, you're going to be in that ring there at the end there. It'll be John Cena on one side, Justin Gabriel, who was the star of the show, by the way. What a performance he had in this match. But Justin Gabriel and Wade Barrett on the other side of the ring, and Cena will go over. And apparently Barrett said to them like, good one, you're taking the piss. We're just doing that because John Cena's Super Cena at this point. And then the guy was like, nope, it's real. The match finish has changed. You're losing. It's the wrong winner, isn't it? The Nexus should have been a made act by vanquishing Team WWE, but they weren't. I've got an itchy nose in here. The hay fever's kicking off in this studio, as it does from time to time. I haven't done anything with powder, okay? Moving on now. In the match itself, which was an extra thing, so the winners were wrong, which is one thing by itself, but the way John Cena survives a DDT to the concrete floor, he pops back up like it's nothing, and then goes on to defeat 2 men, is everything most people hated about Super Cena around this time. Unless, of course, you're a child or a lady, you think he's the coolest and hardest and toughest and most beautiful man ever. But if you had pubic hair and above, You thought that was quintessential bollocks, Super Cena. And on top of that, to make things even worse for this match, the big return for Daniel Bryan, who had been sent home for choking Justin Roberts with his tie. You know that segment on Raw. It's a famous one. That was spoiled by the WWE social media team about half an hour before the main event was due to start, which was still a bit of a shame. Didn't detract from things too much, but still, I'm sure they didn't want it out there. At the end of the day, Super Cena was at his worst here, and the wrong team won. But we look elsewhere on the card now, of course. A bit of a theme is emerging because it was like we have this hot new thing, but we're going to have that hot new thing lose to an established star, because elsewhere on this card, the Big Show defeats the Straight Edge Society in a 3-on-1 handicap match that doesn't even last 7 minutes. Although we do have to say there was an injury suffered by Joey Mercury during this match, but still, in 2010, the Big Show is doing the job for CM Punk and the lads. Of course, Serena is one of the lads. SummerSlam DQ Bollocks is back after 19 minutes of Randy Orton versus Sheamus, a match where had Orton have lost, he would have never got a shot at the title as long as Sheamus had the title around his big white waist. It makes the fact that they put that stipulation on, then went for the DQ finish, it just makes it all just feel like a massive waste of time. Even though in the closing stretches of the match, it turned into a proper like modern day like kick out fest. All the big finishes being hit, all the kick outs being done when you think it's over. It was a good time, but then Big Shamo, he goes for the chair. It's a tug of war with the referee Jack Doan. Shamo that kind of shoves the chair into the midriff of referee Jack Doan, sends him through the ropes, and that's how the DQ happens. Boo, SummerSlam DQ finish, boo. But at least this was one of the show that captivated the imagination of the former Funkadactyl Cameron, because this was the show that had her favorite match of all time on it, 5 minutes and 20 seconds of Melina versus Alicia Fox, where we crowned a new Divas champion in Melina. Stone Cold Steve Austin was in tatters when she said this was her favorite match of all time. And you know what? If that was her favorite match, who are we to take that away from her? It just shows that she knows now about wrestling, or maybe hasn't been shown a lot of professional wrestling. Anyway, that's besides the point. There is nothing else to write home about on this card. This is one of the worst SummerSlams of all time when they objectively got big booking calls wrong, and the rest of the matches didn't really stand or deliver. I think this is prime, and I mean prime, bin territory. So 2010... all of the above, it goes in the bin. SummerSlam 2011 now, the one with the cash in. This card kind of hinges on how much you feed into the old Vince McMahon mantra of the last thing you see is the most important thing you see, because the last thing we saw here was pretty demoralizing, much like SummerSlam 2003, and not really what the doctor ordered at this point in time. The Summer of Punk, the WWE version, was going along great guns until there was a phone call, and it ended up being all about Kevin Nash and Triple H, rather than the biggest star we'd seen outside of John Cena, of course, since Stone Cold Steve Austin in CM Punk. The story goes in the kayfabe that Triple H sent big Kevin Nash, big sexy himself, a text saying, "Stick the winner," out of CM Punk and John Cena in their undisputed WWE title match, which was a great match until Triple H made a mess of the final call. John Cena gets his foot on the rope, but Triple H counted the fall anyway. So here comes Kevin Nash, and he powerbombs Punk, runs away. Then Alberto Del Rio cashes in to become the new champion. Honestly, watching it back, really properly good edge of the seat stuff. But when you take a step back and you think about the context of the Summer of Punk, you think about who CM Punk is and what he became, especially with the shoot promo, the pipe bomb. You know what I'm talking about. You think about all of that, and you're thinking CM Punk just needs to win. And why has it all become about Triple H and Kevin Nash's relationship against CM Punk, rather than CM Punk just against the entirety of the WWE, and more in particularly Vince McMahon himself and his doofus son-in-law and doofus daughter, and they'll be better off when he's dead. All that malarkey. A misstep for me. So yes, a misstep for me, especially when you consider that Del Rio was in a throwaway six-man tag at the start of the night, where he teamed with The Miz and R-Truth to take on John Morrison, Kofi Kingston, and Rey Mysterio. A fun match, but Del Rio at the end of the night hoisting the title high. Yes, he was presented as a main event talent despite the match I've just said there, but CM Punk was done dirty here. and it's fair to say it never got quite back on track, the old Summer of Punk, after that, as we headed into the autumn. Christian Cage? Not even Cage, is he just Christian? It's Christian. And Randy Orton had a great hard-hitting match, as did Wade Barrett and Daniel Bryan, who had a no-bollocks throwback of a match, which, for those two matches, is the same kind of vibe, but I've chosen different words for no reason whatsoever. The lads hit each other hard, and it was good times in both matches. The sixth man that involved Del Rio, as I mentioned there, was another highlight on this card. But again, how you look at this card depends on how much that main event angle takes away from what you saw and how much of a bad mood you were in when the show went off the air. So I think without what happens at the end, it's a definite lovely candidate. But I reckon with what happens at the end, we've got to drag it down. Is it just about bearable towards the top of just about bearable? Yeah, because I think it was such a big misstep in terms of the Summer of Punk and what WWE had and then what they kind of squandered in that moment. SummerSlam 2012 now, the one with the Triple H retirement, as William Regal would put it. This was a show where the company tried to do a few things with clear intention, but it just didn't come off in numerous points on the card. Triple H and Brock Lesnar had a good main event where the story was pretty simple. Triple H had to avoid the Kimura lock, but in the end, he couldn't. Then after the bell, it appeared, so obviously Kimura's locked on, tap out Triple H, match is over. But then after the bell, it looked like Triple H was retiring from in-ring competition because he's saying, "I'm sorry," down the barrel of the lens into the arena, who are chanting, by the way, "You tapped out," and laughing at Triple H as he milks the moment for all it's worth. He's in that ring for a fair amount of time after Brock Lesnar has made him tap out. He then saunters up the ramp, very sad and very dejected, and he sort of does the turn around at the top of the ramp before he goes back through the curtain and says goodbye. But I guess the lack of sympathy meant he thought he couldn't go out like that, so he came back for some more. So that was a moment where they intended to do one thing, couldn't do it because of the crowd, so that went wrong. Elsewhere, a recently turned CM Punk faced John Cena and The Big Show for the WWE Championship, with the finish seeing The Big Show submitting to the Anaconda Vice and the STF at the same time. However, AJ Lee restarted the match, which then saw John Cena hit Big Show with an AA, so you're thinking Super Cena is going to get the win here, but no, CM Punk swoops in there for a cover on show for the win, so he takes the title for himself. The finish of the World Heavyweight Championship match between Sheamus and Alberto Del Rio was also a bit of a mess, where they tried to do some silly stuff, but it just made everyone look like a bit of a tip because Ricardo Rodriguez, the ring announcer for Alberto Del Rio, so Del Rio's getting a bit upset with how the match is going. Rodriguez is on the apron. Del Rio sort of drags him in the ring, going like, why can't I win, you silly boy? I bloody hate you. And in the midst of all that, stuff happens, and it ends up being where Ricardo Rodriguez tries to throw his shoe at Del Rio so Del Rio can catch it and use it as a weapon on Sheamus' head, while the referee's just sort of going, "Ricardo, get out the ring, please. You're not supposed to be in here." But he does that, throws it a bit too far. Sheamus gets it. He gets the shoe shot in on Del Rio's head. Then it's an Irish curse backbreaker, and that's how the title match ends here. By the way, Sheamus is the babyface. And obviously Del Rio has egg on his face, but still it's not a very valiant win for a babyface in a title match like this one. It wasn't all convoluted and a bit naff though, as the opening contest between Chris Jericho and Dolph Ziggler was an underrated banger, while Daniel Bryan and Kane would be entertaining and would lead to the two rivals eventually forming their much beloved tag team with their hugs and their therapy and their orgasms in the diner. If you know, you know. Those two matches I've just mentioned there just about saved the card from being a complete dud. But while we are here, we've got to mention Fred Durst. Yeah, as we always say, because this is where he got himself kicked out of the arena and earned WWE's old favourite band in the world ever, Limp Bizkit, of course, a banishment from WWE because he flipped the bird right down the barrel of the lens live on the show. However, of course, this year, 2026, they're back this year with MGK. Fix your effing face. Yeah. So that's good news. I like Limp Bizkit. Oh, anyway, we'll move on. Lowdown. It's got to be. Don't think it's quite bin-worthy. Just about bearable. I don't care about the order in just about bearable. It's only the best tier we care about the order in. But I'm going to go 2012, just about bearable, because they tried things, they didn't come off, and the rest of the card, it was a little bit naff. SummerSlam 2013, the one with the Triple H heel turn. This was a nicely paced show, comparable to taking a trip in an aeroplane with no turbulence because you're going along smoothly and you're really high, not because you've taken any edibles or some of that Mary Jane that you like to smoke in the pipes and whatnot, but just because you're in the sky. What I'm trying to say here is this was a nice card to watch, and it's going to go really high in the tier list. And for some reason, I equated that to an aeroplane flight with some edibles. Anyway, imagine you're on that plane and you're reading a book called The History of Chocolate, because that's what this SummerSlam was, in that it was really solid, it was consistent, and it didn't include much in the way of bollocks. Not to say that it was boring, which I imagine The History of Chocolate book might be, but still, it was all right. I've made a mess with these comparisons. I'll stop doing them from now on. We see a couple of matches that might just be the best ever on this one SummerSlam pay-per-view. So this was a little bit stacked. The first one, because this show was the site of the Beast versus the Best. It was CM Punk taking on Brock Lesnar. The pair going in really hard on one another in the midst of their no disqualification match, where apparently both lads received a standing ovation as they returned back through the curtain after the match. Such was the quality at what they produced inside that their squared circle. But the main event, that's probably the main headline taker, as big as that match was there, where Daniel Bryan took on John Cena, and Daniel Bryan picked up the biggest win of his career to date, or to that date, I should say, because he did more dates afterwards, didn't he, with a couple of bigger wins, I guess we could say, for WrestleMania 30. Bryan won the WWE title for the first time in a very, 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 very good match, and it was all going so well. The fans got what they wanted. A new guy, the would-be B-plus player, is now the champion. But then we do have party poopers even at the biggest party of the summer, which of course SummerSlam is. I don't know if I've mentioned that so far. That's sarcasm. Yes, I have. Because Triple H turned heel for the first time in 6 or 7 years to attack Daniel Bryan, allowing Randy Orton to swoop in there, cash in, and take the title. But of course, come WrestleMania 30, we all know the story. Vince McMahon wanted Batista and Randy Orton in the main event. The fans want another thing. And as always, the fans know better. So all's well that ends well, in the words of Wallace from Wallace and Gromit. Outside of that fun World Heavyweight title outside of those two matches, as we should say, we had a fun World Heavyweight title match between Alberto Del Rio and Christian. No cage there this time. I've done well. There wasn't too much else to write about on this card, which has become a phrase I've used too much. I find myself repeating these phrases over and over again. What's the comparable? I'm not going to write home about this match. I'm not going to tell my grandchildren about this match. There wasn't much else on this card to go off. It was the setting, though, for Bray Wyatt's main roster in-ring debut against Kane in a Ring of Fire match. Not an Inferno match, but a Ring of Fire match. But it wasn't the best because, as always, with fire, what it tends to do is it tends to steal the oxygen from the area the fire is within. So if you're trying to do something quite physically taxing like professional wrestling and you've got no oxygen to breathe, it doesn't lend itself to a good wrestling match happening. And that happened there again with the Ring of Fire match. But there were, outside of that, a couple of minor positives. This is a hard one because the two matches were massive. But then the rest of the card dragged it down a bit, which means it's either... I can't put it on the same as 1988 and 1999 or 03. I reckon this is the bottom one of the best tier. I know I've said the undercard was underwhelming there, but those two matches alone. And there was no complete duds. There was just nothing that was just like, wah, before the two main event matches got there. Or the semi and the main. So yes, we'll put 2013 as the definitive bottom of the best tier. Yes. SummerSlam 2014 now, the one with Brie Bella versus Stephanie McMahon, and another match that also happened there that was quite newsworthy. But yes, this was a bit of a sleeper SummerSlam because outside of the main event that nobody saw coming in terms of the way it was booked, and perhaps outside of Stephanie McMahon coming out for her match against Brie Bella, and most people saying, wow, what a pretty lady. That's a nice outfit, and the match they had afterwards, that over-delivered as well. What do you remember about SummerSlam 2014 outside of those two things? Not much, but I'll try and remind you of a couple of things. So yes, the major plus points about this show, unbelievably for some people who are watching Brie Bella wrestle here in 2026, one of the big plus points of this show was Brie Bella versus Stephanie McMahon because they surpassed all expectations. As I imagine some people, or most people, were merely watching just to see Stephanie McMahon, who had been a heel for so many years on television by this point. She hadn't received any form of comeuppance, as all the good heels have to do. A lot of people watching this match to see Stephanie McMahon just poo the bed, just have a bad time, but she didn't do that. A very accomplished performance in this match here against Brie Bella. If you don't believe me, go back and watch it. It's worth your time. As was the opener of the card between Miz and Dolph Ziggler. A great little contest that saw Ziggler win the IC title, and it's worth checking out if you can't remember the flag match between Rusev and Jack Swagger. huh? We always have to say when we say Jack Swagger. This was better than expected as well because you hear flag match, you hear Rusev, you hear Jack Swagger. You don't think much, but my God, it over-delivered. More plus points from the show include Bray Wyatt versus Chris Jericho, and by this point in the game, former Shield friends Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins' lumberjack match that was all kinds of fun, as was Roman Reigns' first big singles match solo run win over Randy Orton. This was in a time before everyone with a penis and over the age of 12 started to resent Roman Reigns massively. This is only start of his mega push, and oh, how Vince McMahon would hold our boy back when you think about what the Tribal Chief became when Vince McMahon relaxed and let him be more like himself instead of being this weird guy with contact lenses. It was a strange time indeed. But the main event hit us like a train because there were so many suplexes delivered from Brock Lesnar to John Cena in a glorified squash match. And you'd normally be thinking that would be a bad thing. Obviously, you're anticipating John Cena versus Brock Lesnar, competitive match. Whoever wins, wins. It's probably going to be Super Cena rising up and vanquishing the big bloody diddler in the Cultaholic Wrestling podcast, into the word, of course. But no, there was loads and loads of suplexes here, and Brock Lesnar absolutely mauled John Cena. It was the fact that John Cena had been Super Cena for so many years up to this point that nobody saw this kind of performance coming. It was absolutely brilliant, and it was brave booking because the story goes, obviously, Daniel Bryan came out of WrestleMania 30 as the WWE champion, and all the belts, the confetti, all that malarkey. So he's going to SummerSlam, if everything goes to plan, to face Brock Lesnar, but they didn't have Bryan there because he was injured. So instead of inserting John Cena and changing the plans because it was John Cena, they apparently booked the match as if John Cena was Daniel Bryan, and that's what they were going to do anyway. Like, Bryan was going to get mauled by Brock Lesnar, John Cena fills in, John Cena gets mauled by Brock Lesnar. So fair play over the, the past 8 years or whatever of John Cena just beating everybody all of the time, which is what he did, and I know that's how you make a star and whatnot, but it was a bit much from time to time. Fair play to them for sticking to the plan if Daniel Bryan was in there instead of John Cena. It was very, 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 very effective indeed. And of course, it was, I guess, a nice continuation heading out of WrestleMania 30 as well, because Lesnar ended the streak. Now we've made him like the definitive, if he wasn't already, the final boss of WWE before The Rock became that thing in years to come. So really good SummerSlam, certainly on par with the previous year for me, which means I need to stick it up there. But I do think the undercard had a bit more, so we'll go 2014 above 2013. SummerSlam is on a roll, let me tell you. You should watch it if you're ever bored. I'd recommend watching it. A lot to like about that show. SummerSlam 2015 now, the one with Jon Stewart beating John Cena. This was a show that had plenty of good wrestling, but when it came to the stuff you probably remember and the big stuff that a show is judged on, the booking was really, really odd. First and foremost, Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker in his Kelsey Grammer phase had their first singles match since the streak ended at WrestleMania 30, and because Taker didn't get concussed, this was far better than WrestleMania 30 ever was, as you would expect. And of course, it featured a really classic moment where The Undertaker laughed so hard that Brock Lesnar got the giggles as well. What a pair of effing cuties. Obviously, they're in the ring. Lesnar's laughing at Taker. Taker sits up, then they start laughing at each other. It's a fantastic moment because you wouldn't expect to see either man do that, let alone The Undertaker. But it was the booking of this match that let it down, as it did elsewhere on the card, but more on that later. As The Undertaker is locked in the Kimura and the bell is rung because the timekeeper saw him tap. Referee Charles Robinson counted one fall as while this Kimura was on. Lesnar's shoulders were on the mat, but the timekeeper rang the bell. Paul Heyman gets in the ring. He's shocked. He doesn't know what to do with himself. Charles is berating the timekeeper, shouting, "What are you doing? It's my job to ring the bell." Then we see low blow from The Undertaker on Brock Lesnar in the midst of all this confusion with the referee's back turned. Hell's Gate. Lesnar passes out and Taker gets the win, but of course it's a win with a massive asterisk next to it. That was an asterisk. There you go. The crowd were not on board with what they just saw. And I get why you can't have Brock Lesnar tap out if you want to have a tap out finish at the end of this one, because he was the guy who ended the streak. He's going back to UFC. I'm guessing talks were taking place by 2015 because it was, of course, 2016 when he made his return to the Octagon. So I assume talks might have been taking place. So I understand why you can't have Lesnar be completely tapping out at this point in the game. But why do something as convoluted as this? When do you ever see the timekeeper going into business for himself like this? And to make it even worse, WWE then replayed the footage of Taker tapping out. So this was all part of the plan. Because, yeah, if it was real, surely they wouldn't show the babyface tapping out when he gets a win of this ilk. This was his big revenge fight. This was like to avenge the streak ending, and they've done it in a way where it just didn't lend itself to it being like, yes, he's done it. Of course, they're building towards Hell in a Cell, which happened a couple of months later, but still, there's tens of better ways to get to that Hell in a Cell match than doing what they did in this big SummerSlam match here. Another selling point of this SummerSlam, though, was the triple threat match between Team PCB, Team Bad, and Team Bella, who were looking to kick off the women's revolution proper. Obviously, the NXT ladies went to the main roster at the start of the summer of 2015. We got 15 minutes of action, which was obviously progression in terms of main roster women's matches about the time. But in terms of like the stakes, I don't want to say gang warfare like it's 1997 with the DOA and that kind of thing, but you know what I'm saying? It didn't have that like, oh, this is a big thing we're watching. It just felt like, yes, it was 15 minutes, and that is a sign of progression because back in the day, they would get 3 and 4 minutes, wouldn't they, the ladies? Because that's how Vince McMahon liked to do things. And didn't he get proven wrong as the years have gone by? But it just felt like another match on the card when it shouldn't have felt that way, if that makes any kind of sense to you. And earlier in the night, we saw a winner-takes-all match between Seth Rollins and John Cena, and oh boy, we've got to say before the final bit, the match itself was fantastic. Rollins, this was the show where he came out in his all-white gear. We're having a great time. The final moments were absolutely tragic, though, because Jon Stewart, that guy off the telly, and Big Daddy, he turned heel because he wasn't such a big fan of John Cena potentially equaling Ric Flair's world title record. He's such a big Ric Flair fan, he took it upon himself to step in and make sure John Cena didn't get there. He hits, so the referee's down, Stewart gets in the ring with a chair, and he hits Cena with his chair shot that wouldn't make a big jelly wobble. That's how soft it was. But obviously, because it's the plans, John Cena feels the contact and goes down anyway. And this allows Seth Rollins to swoop in there and pick up the victory. How very 2026 of WWE back in 2015, or maybe 2025 back in 2015. Just keep the celebrities away from big matches. Will they ever learn? There were some good things happening on this card as well, including a pair of tag team matches in Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns, taking on Luke Harper and Bray Wyatt, of course. RIP to those two latter lads there. Stephen Amell and Neville teamed up to defeat Stardust and King Barrett in a match that exceeded all expectations as well. Sheamus and Randy Orton had a very solid opener on the night, which was won by the Mr. Money in the Bank Celtic Warrior as he was on his way to getting the world title by the end of the year, with Roman Reigns drowning in confetti. What a moment it was, even if not everyone was on board with Sheamus winning the title at that stage in the game. And Kevin Owens was getting his feet under the table good and proper on the main roster with a solid singles match against someone who was impossible. He's allergic to bad matches, Cesaro. So yes, I've got to say, I've just, in my notes here, I've got my notes in front of me. The OG plans for that tag team match between Reigns, Ambrose, Harper, and Wyatt was supposed to be a 6-man tag match. Obviously, Eric Rowan joining his family members. But on the babyface side, or the other side, because the Wyatts were, I guess they were healed by 2015, weren't they? Yeah, no. They were shades of grey. But anyway, on the other side of the ring, we were supposed to see Sting. But Eric Rowan got injured, which meant they downsized the match from a normal 6-man tag to a normal 2-on-2 tag team match. And of course, the Stinger would come back a little while later in the autumn while feuding with Seth Rollins while pretending to be a statue and all that kind of thing. But yes, the bad on this card really does outweigh the good. Obviously, the 2 tag team matches were the standout and the good kind of stuff. The bad stuff was just headlined by Jon Stewart. As I clicked my knuckles there, I've got a thing popping up there, so we'll get rid of that. Sorry, Bobby Lashley on the edit. And then we go 2015, I am going to go bearable. Could have been a lot better than it was. Things were motoring along in 2015, let me tell you, because that's when I was starting my writing career in professional wrestling content. I was having a great time, but this show wasn't very good. SummerSlam 2016, the one with the shoot in the ring and almost backstage too. Yes, WWE booked Brock Lesnar versus Randy Orton because the pair had never had a big singles match on pay-per-view, so why the hell not? Sheer star power can work on a wrestling card, and that's what they tried to do here. Their only other singles match on WWE TV before this one was all the way back in September of 2002 when Lesnar beat Orton in 5 5.5 minutes. So yes, there was time to be made up right here. It was the booking of the finish that split opinion on the night, not only in terms of fans watching, but also with the wrestlers backstage, as we'll talk about. As Brock Lesnar, with the point of his elbow, just smashed Randy Orton in the head until a big gash appeared that was deeper than the deep blue sea. That's how deep it was. This brought out Shane McMahon. This is still in kayfabe, of course, part of the storyline, because Shane McMahon, was the SmackDown co-general manager at the time. Shane was down there to sort things out because he is the best in the world. He doesn't sort things out, spoiler alert, everybody, but backstage, Chris Jericho was watching what was going on, and he was ready to fight Brock Lesnar for real, because he thought the Beast had gone into business for himself, and it had nothing to do with Lesnar's return to the UFC Octagon, which was happening, of course, around this time. We've got to pay our respects. That's doth the old cap to Randy Orton for agreeing to do this. Imagine being proposed. Would you mind Brock Lesnar smashing you repeatedly in the head with the point of his elbow? My answer would be yes. Yes, I would mind that. Leave me alone. So fair play for Randy Orton going through with that, because we know the risks associated with blows to the head like that. Hey, I could see why they did it for getting a headline or two, but it didn't seem worth it, if that makes any kind of sense. So yes, that went a certain way, as did another big match in the card, which pitted Finn Balor against Seth Rollins. Finn Balor, of course, after a stellar run in NXT, where he proved he might just be the coolest man we have ever seen. Finn was in the main event picture, contesting for the newly minted Universal Championship. We used to call it that back in the day because it was red like strawberry jam. But a barricade bomb saw Finn Balor dislocate his shoulder and damage his labrum, meaning he had to vacate the title he won on this SummerSlam the very next night on Raw. A very, very gutsy performance from Finn as he had to fight his way through it. What a hard bastard. But I've got to say the title itself was a massive detractor from the match, because every single time it was on a plinth at ringside. Stephanie McMahon and Mick Foley sat next to it because they were in charge of Raw. And every single time the camera went to the plinth with the Universal Championship on it, boos rang around the arena, because you must be talking less than 10% of the viewership who, were old enough to have an opinion, not just based on like, wow, wrestling, isn't it cool? When you're young and naive, when you get a bit grizzled in life and you're like, oh, I've got opinions on things. There must be less than 10% who thought that was a good looking belt. Such a lazy design. The color scheme didn't quite work. You obviously get used to it a few years down the line. Then they changed it to a blue one, didn't they? Because SmackDown, stupid one. But it was next to ringside. It was distracting because every single time it went on screen, it was booed. Elsewhere on this SummerSlam card, Dean Ambrose and Dolph Ziggler failed to hit the heights you'd think they would hit, especially at this point in 2016, because of what would come in the months to come. We saw the initial draft. I guess you would call it initial, wouldn't you? The initial of the most recent era, brand split. There was a big one in the summer of 2016 after a couple of years of there not being one. SmackDown Live was absolutely fantastic in those opening weeks and months with Dean Ambrose, Dolph Ziggler, Chris Jericho, James Ellsworth. Those times. SmackDown Live was so good. A tight 2-hour broadcast. Fantastic stuff. But yes, Dean Ambrose and Dolph Ziggler didn't hit the heights here. But it wasn't all bad on this card, as John Cena and AJ Styles had one of their classic matches. It wasn't as good as their Royal Rumble match that they had a few months down the line, but it was still very good all the same. And much like in 2014, it was a massive shock to see John Cena be beat up that badly by Brock Lesnar. By 2016, it was still pretty much it was still a big thing to get used to see someone like AJ Styles, who, of course, by Vince McMahon, he was very, very small. I know he's very, very good, one of the best wrestlers of all time, but obviously Vince McMahon was big on size, and you're thinking AJ Styles is going there. Still, we're like a half year into his run here in WWE, and you're thinking, oh, is he going to go all the way Vince McMahon with AJ Styles just because of the size? Because it was always about size with Vince McMahon, the weird guy. And no matter how good you were at wrestling, but yes, AJ Styles kicks out of an Avalanche AA, then beat up John Cena and won clean as a whistle. So fair play to John Cena for giving back to the business by this point in his career. Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho's relationship of donkey and goat went to new levels in their match against Enzo and Cass. It was a fun match, especially remembered by me by Kevin Owens taking the piss out of Enzo Amore's little skibbity-doo dance on the apron there. Fantastic scenes from Big KO. It's a show, though, if we're wrapping things up here for 2016, that's largely remembered for the wrong reasons, as it put the moments above storylines up and down the card here, unless You do love massive gashes in foreheads and bollocks because, literal bollocks, because this is the show where Neville's gear threatened to shoot on him because we might have seen him pop a bollock while he was wrestling the Dudley Boys earlier on in the night. Not the best edition of SummerSlam, this one, but in no danger of the bin. A big old load of meh. I think it goes towards the top of just about bearable. Somewhere in there. There we go. SummerSlam 2017, the one with the massive four-way. Yes, this was Brock Lesnar versus Samoa Joe versus Braun Strowman, and Roman Reigns is in there as well. And those four massive lads. Now, I seem to remember a lot of this match took place on the outside of the ring. I'm picturing chairs being thrown. I'm picturing multiple announced table spots, I should say. They battered each other, and it was absolutely fantastic. This is my kind of wrestling, right up my street, because I love big, sweaty men. The only thing that ruined it somewhat was the stipulation of the match being if if Brock loses, Lesnar and Heyman have to leave the WWE. And that telegraphs slightly who was going to win, because that was never going to happen at this point in 2017. But despite that, up the meat planet, this was fantastic. Before getting to this main event, though, we had a bit of a slog of a main card to get through. 9 matches that included fantastic scenes, like John Cena's squash of Baron Corbin that lasted 10 minutes. Mere days after Baron Corbin failed to cash in his money in the bank successfully due to apparent heat that he had in the company at the time. Obviously, he recovered from that, and they gave him everything. They blamed how bad Raw was on Baron Corbin. That's how much they gave him about a year and a half after this show. 10 seconds of Randy Orton versus Rusev, where Randy actually won via pinfall. I don't even know what you say about that. If you have been watching my stuff for about 10 years now, you know that Rusev was my bane spirit animal. So this was a dagger to the heart, watching him getting beaten up in 10 seconds by Randy Orton like this one. WWE Champion Jinder Mahal defeated Shinsuke Nakamura in a match I can guarantee you remember absolutely nothing from. If you do remember something from that match, you let me know down there, because my goodness me, this one passed me by until I went back and watched this show. The Big Show and Big Cass, no Enzo Amore at all, in the ring. They did a thing, but Enzo was suspended above the ring in a cage because famously or infamously around this time, WWE was selling loads of those toys at the time, the shark cage toys. So we saw a couple of matches around this time period with someone suspended above the ring in cage, like it was WCW back in the 1980s. And then we've got to mention it. Shane McMahon was the special guest referee for Kevin Owens versus AJ Styles, and somehow Shane McMahon, thanks to planned botches and, Shane making sure, I am the best referee here. I'm calling this down the middle. It was more about Kevin versus Shane, which had been going on for a while by this point, rather than the match that people wanted to see, which was just Kevin Owens versus AJ Styles, I should say, which is what the match actually was. But what I'm saying is it was more about Kevin versus Shane than it was Kevin versus AJ Styles, which is what everyone wanted to see. It was a very strangely booked thing, but then in the context of Shane McMahon from 2016 through to 2022, where the ego apparently got bigger than Mr. Garrison's head. It was no real surprise, really. It was just a shame to see. Shane McMahon really ruined this one. And what could have been? What could have been, eh? What could have been? Damn Shane McMahon, circa those years, all the way down, straight to hell. But this card was not a complete dud, though, as Sasha Banks kicked off her 8-day reign as Raw Women's Champion by toppling Alexa Bliss in what was probably the feel-good moment of the night. And Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose beat the Bar in a brilliant tag team match. And also, we've got to say, Natalya versus Naomi was very decent as well, where Natalya became the SmackDown Women's Champion. But I guess the underrated highlight of the night, because it wasn't really on the main card, which normally I wouldn't factor it in, but this might just be bell to bell the best match we saw at SummerSlam 2017 outside of that main event. The pre-show stoppers of the New Day versus the Usos? Jesus Christ. The Oofa Loofers. My goodness me, I'm LA Knight. The Usos versus the New Day on the pre-show. They were clearly booked to be on that pre-show, and they said, right, follow this. And still up until that main event, and maybe even Rollins and Ambrose in the Bar's tag team match, I don't think anybody did. So up the Usos, and the New Day for doing what they did on the pre-show of SummerSlam 2017. It's not the worst SummerSlam, but it can't be going any higher than slightly around about average. Is it better? I'm going to put it the bottom of all right. Well, just in all right. Because that main event was spectacular. The kickoff show was spectacular. A good tag team match on the main card as well. And There was some all right stuff on that one. SummerSlam 2018 now, the one with the main event nobody wanted. The main event in question was Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns as the big dog looked to end Lesnar's 18-month reign as the Universal Champion at this time. This was the third big pay-per-view match between the pair in a matter of months after WrestleMania 34 and the Greatest Royal Rumble happening just before this SummerSlam, and the sentiment was turning against this feud as it seemed Roman Reigns just couldn't do it. He couldn't get the job done because this one really dates all the way back to WrestleMania 31. It's Lesnar versus Reigns in the main event. Then the heist of the century happens from Seth Rollins. And in terms of Reigns taking something off Lesnar, he hadn't done it by this point, and people were starting to think it's never ever going to happen. Also, around WrestleMania 34 time, it was heavily anticipated that Brock Lesnar was leaving the company to go back and do some UFC. So the fact that he won at WrestleMania 4 was a massive, massive shock. And obviously people were very, very jaded by this point of Lesnar's 18-month reign, where he was never on the weekly TVs. I don't know what percentage he must have been on those shows, but it must be around about 10% or something like that. It was a really bad time in terms of getting invested in the top title because it was never on bloody TV. He had the company bent over, did Brock Lesnar. And I guess fair play to him. I guess we all want to do that, just never go to work but still get paid. But anyway, fans were jaded from what they were seeing at this point. And on top of that, I think by this point, fans were way more interested in seeing a Braun Strowman cash in, because Braun Strowman, I used to call him the meme among men. Obviously, his real nickname was the Monster among men, but the stuff he was doing, I'm not finished with you, as he's trying to kill Roman Reigns and the ambulance and throw Roman Reigns off a ledge and other things of that ilk. Fans were really getting behind Braun Strowman around this time. And Braun Strowman was Mr. Money in the Bank. He had a really fun squash match earlier on against Kevin Owens, who was thrown around like a bouncy ball. So fair play to Kevin Owens for taking that kind of stuff. So we're thinking maybe tonight's the night. Braun Strowman, could he be the one to cash in on Brock Lesnar or Roman Reigns, whoever the bollocks in this match here, and take the title home? But no, we can't have nice things here, as Strowman was dispatched by Lesnar, and the briefcase was as well, just kicked, I think it was, up to the top of the ramp, and then Braun Strowman didn't cash in here. Reigns won the match, so he finally got the job done. So I guess it was a kind of a double-edged sword kind of situation, because fans were happy that Lesnar's reign was over. In theory, I should say, in theory, Reigns appears on TV every single week with the title, which I think he did by and large until he didn't. But it wasn't the man they wanted to do this, because Braun Strowman was, I think, just gaining more popularity at that time compared to Roman Reigns. It's a weird one to go back and look on with the context of the last 6 years of Roman Reigns in mind, and Braun Strowman, I guess, because Braun Strowman went by the wayside. Now he eats all the food all of the time in a very entertaining fashion. Roman Reigns potentially is the biggest star in the business today. So there we go. Elsewhere, where are we? Yeah, The Miz and Daniel Bryan finally had a match after that episode of Talking Smack a year or two earlier, but the brass knuckles-assisted win for The Miz really deflated the crowd. Wendy was on high alert as AJ Styles and Samoa Joe did battle in a very good WWE title match that was tarnished by the return of the SummerSlam DQ finish. Woo! Why am I doing that? I don't know. This was also the show where the man started as she exited her own womb. She was born here. That's what I'm trying to say. She turned on Charlotte Flair mere moments after Charlotte won the SmackDown Women's title in a triple threat that also involved Carmella. I remember reading at the time the turn from Becky to Charlotte, or the turn from Becky on Charlotte, was supposed to be Becky turning more heel or turning properly heel, but the fans ate it up because Becky was justified. This is around the time when Charlotte Flair was just being shoved down our throats willy-nilly by Vince McMahon. So Becky being hard done by, the fans were behind Becky, and she was right to slap Charlotte in the face. Go on, the Baxter, we all said. The Baxter. Where the hell did that come from? And then obviously the things that happened around Survivor Series season this year in 2018 with the broken nose and the blood and the come on Nia Jax, I'll fight you in the crowd. All added to that, which started at this SummerSlam. This show also saw Ronda Rousey when we were still being wowed by her in the ring. She squashed Alexa Bliss for the Raw Women's Championship. And this was a show where you could have stopped watching after the first match, because the best match of the night by an absolute country mile was Seth Rollins and Dolph Ziggler. They went over 22 minutes for the IC title, and the rest of the card from that point on really flattered to deceive. So I think this match, it's close to the bin. And I'm doing this with my finger, if you can see my finger, because I reckon it's circling the rim. It's on the rim of the bin. Is it out the bin? The squash match was fun. That opening match, I think it just about It circles the rim of the bin, but then drops to the outside of the bin. Not into the bin, on the outside of the bin. But it's very close. SummerSlam 2019 now, the one with The Fiend's debut. But when you hear WWE in 2019, you might think of bad things like dog food and Lacey Evans in the main event of pay-per-views. But despite all of that, SummerSlam 2019 was a really solid show that produced some very good matches and some very good moments. Some very good moments. Some very good moments which started on the kickoff show because after 8 years away from doing anything physical inside a professional wrestling ring, Edge did his first physical thing in 8 years by spearing Elias, and we had no idea at that time, the summer of 2019, what was to come in a few short months at the 2020 Raw Rumble. He emerges through the smoke. On this day, I see clearly. Oh, it's emotional. Emotional, I tell you. Brock Lesnar and Seth Rollins had a match better than the one that they had at WrestleMania a few months earlier. That one, of course, opened the card. This one didn't do that, I don't think, off the top of my head. Was it later on? Christ alive, I watched a lot of wrestling this week. I don't know. Doesn't matter. This SummerSlam one was better at WrestleMania. That's the point I was saying. Rollins at this point was a proper fiery babyface with the whole world behind him, trying to take down the beast and these reigns of tyranny where he take the belt home for ages. But this is despite the fact that WWE by the summer of 2019 were doing their best to ruin him because they had him and Becky become not only obviously a real life couple behind the scenes, but they had them become an on-screen couple, and you could just tell they weren't that comfortable doing this kind of thing at this point in time, and it made for some really bad television. And the booking, obviously Becky Lynch coming off of WrestleMania 35, arguably the biggest name in WWE in terms of fan sentiment, in terms of reaction when she walked through the curtain. And then eventually she ends up feuding with Baron Corbin and Lacey Evans, and that's not what anybody wanted. That's not how you make a star or continue the momentum of a star at that kind of level, which Becky Lynch reached after WrestleMania 35. So yeah, they were doing everything they could to make Rollins a bit of a geek, to be honest with you, alongside his wife/girlfriend at the time, I should say. But Rollins in the match here against Brock Lesnar, he threw everything at Lesnar, including the kitchen sink, on his way to getting a massive win. Because still here in 2019, getting this kind of win over Brock Lesnar, obviously 5 years after the streak was broken, but Lesnar was still booked as the final boss of the WWE before The Rock became that thing, of course. So Rollins getting this kind of win, it still meant a lot to do it in the way he did it, if that makes any kind of sense. The Fiend also made his debut at this year's SummerSlam in an absolute mauling of poor old Finn Balor. I think the story goes that Finn was off to get married, so they just wrote him off by having him being eaten by Bray Wyatt. The debut, the look, I remember watching it the first time, absolutely blown away. Watching it live in this office here, actually. The theme song, fantastic. The look of the Fiend, fantastic with the mask, but not only the mask, but also the severed head lantern. Remember that being like a wah wah wee wah kind of moment. It was absolutely perfect, pitch perfect debut, and it's obviously a travesty what followed in terms of his wrestling booking first and foremost. Obviously, his untimely demise as well. But why they went so early with like, oh, it's Halloween, so we've got to sell some Fiend masks. Let's make him world champion and just overexpose him too much too soon. That was a massive shame. It should have been handled with a lot more care. But I guess they like money at the end of the day, don't they? As we all do. But, you know, get it in good ways. Not ham-fisted ways. I don't know what I'm saying now. Elsewhere on this SummerSlam 2019 card, Trish Stratus had one of her retirement matches against Charlotte Flair, which was good. Kevin Owens and Shane McMahon were still feuding, believe it or not, by this time as well, but their match was fine, mainly because the right man won, and that right man was not Shane McMahon. Other matches that delivered on the card were AJ Styles and Ricochet, as you would expect, but you wouldn't expect them to be Ricochet face, AJ Styles heel, but they were. They were. Imagine that in 2026. Goldberg and Dolph Ziggler was fantastic because it culminated with Dolph Ziggler saying, I've eaten 27 spears, but they were lucky. If you could hit the 28th on me, that's when you prove you're better than me, Bill. And Bill came down and did it. It wasn't quite 28 spears, but it was still a lot of spears all the same. It was a fantastic little angle there. And then the WWE title match between Kofi Kingston, still the champion by this point, of course, because we weren't quite at SmackDown on Fox by this point, where he leapt into the arms of Brock Lesnar and lost in 3 seconds just about, maybe 5. Yeah, 2 seconds to jump in and 3 seconds for the count. But Kofi by this point wasn't being booked very well at all either, because it ended in a double count out. Because SummerSlam, of course, we know this by now, it's a lovely tradition, but also you want your valiant champion to look valiant, and this didn't make him look valiant. The signs were there, and obviously by the time Fox came around, that's when things went really, really wrong. Elsewhere, Bayley and Ember Moon, you'd think it'd be a fantastic match because they are two fantastic professional wrestlers, but it didn't hit the heights you would think. But yes, two little bit of a on the card, but the rest of it I thought was pretty bloody good, especially the debut of The Fiend, which was pitch perfect, which when you think of like the Viking Experience and Karrion Kross and more recent examples, we take a good debut. We do. We take it. We take it. We take it. We take it. You know what? I'm going to go bottom of lovely, lovely. Speaking about it there, I remember SummerSlam 2019 quite fondly. Quite fondly indeed. So yes, lovely, lovely for SummerSlam 2019. SummerSlam 2020 now, the one with Roman Reigns' massive teeth. I've named these like Friends episodes. Can you tell yet? We're only 75 in. So yes, COVID time, everyone. And while WrestleMania 36 exceeded all expectations in this new normal we knew back then, SummerSlam 2020 was even better than WrestleMania 36 for my money. This was the first pay-per-view to take place inside the Thunderdome, as Vince McMahon would call it back then. A low point of the show, let's get out of the way first, was the main event between Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman, where Roman Reigns did make his return with his new massive teeth. Teeth. But of course, this would be all right because Roman Reigns came back. And because there was no live crowds, apparently that's the reason why Vince McMahon was more willing to experiment with Roman Reigns' character, because it was clear from 2014 all the way through until 2020, there was one vision for Vince McMahon when it came to Roman Reigns, and it was blue-eyed babyface, suffering succotash, one for the kids. But we know that's not Roman Reigns. The fact that they allowed him to be more himself and the heights he's hit since then, Vince, again, I said it earlier on, I'll say it again, Vince didn't half hold him back. But yes, the crowds were not there, they experimented, and it all ended well. But yeah, that main event between Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman, in the midst of their weird feud where they were trying things, obviously because of the pandemic, more cinematic style matches were coming in. Some were good, some were bad. The ones that Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman did largely didn't quite hit, like obviously John Cena versus Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania 36. But elsewhere on this SummerSlam card, legend killer Randy Orton was back around this time in WWE, and he was making a mockery of everything. However, he failed to defeat Drew McIntyre for the WWE title, I should say. Excuse me. I'll put my teeth back in right now, as the champion retained following a backslide after both men failed to hit their finishing move. So it was like an RKO missed, a Claymore missed, and then Drew just goes backslide. A proper great throwback finish. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. This finish could have been done in the 70s, the 60s, the 80s, the 90s. It would have fit in all of them, but it was great all the same. Hello? That sounded like someone was in the office when I'm all alone. That was a bit terrifying. Anyway, we move on. Asuka pulled double duty at this SummerSlam, and while she failed to defeat Bayley in the opener for the SmackDown Women's title, she did beat Sasha Banks later in the night to regain the Raw Women's Championship. When you look back at Sasha Banks, by the way, she wasn't good at holding on to titles in WWE. I don't know what that was about the company. It was like, oh yes, yeah, have a good moment, but don't keep that title for too long in terms of like a singles one. I know she was the tag team champion with Bayley for a while there, but still, singles titles, she was a bit allergic to them once she got a hold of them. Dominic Mysterio also made his in-ring debut at this SummerSlam in an entertaining street fight against Seth Rollins, which was obviously, it was nothing on what Dirty Dom's gone on to do since he turned heel in 2022, but Rollins dragged him to a fantastic match, because you're thinking he looked about 12 years old. He's walking, he's just like, hi, I'm Dom Mysterio, and I'm the son of Rey Mysterio, and I'm being respectful and a nice guy, and all that malarkey. But Rollins still dragged him to a fantastic match. Mandy Rose ended her feud with former best pal Sonya Deville by defeating her in a loser leaves WWE match. Of course, Sonya would come back. I'm not mistaken in saying, am I? She definitely came back, didn't she? Yes, she did. I'm going to go for it. My mind's all over the shop today. But considering the time, considering the certain restrictions that were in place in the time, just not in terms of wrestling, but in terms of the world and what entertainment can be filmed in certain places at what time, this was a solid arse card. I don't think it's going to penetrate the upper echelons of this tier list, but there are mitigating circumstances around that, like I've just said there. But I do think it was all right. It might not be lovely, but I'm going to go towards the top of all right, because 1997 won't move there. We'll go near the top of all right there for SummerSlam 2020. SummerSlam 2021 now, the one with Gage Berg, who is the son of Goldberg. But yes, this show was held only 1 month after WWE resumed touring following the COVID-19 pandemic, and it was a bit of a one-match card. That one match was very, very good, though. It was Edge versus Seth Rollins. Edge coming out with his Brood entrance. It didn't say Brood Edge, which is a thing that should never have happened, WWE. That is whack, yo! Whack, I tell thee. But he came out to the Broods theme, got to the ramp, then on this day, Metalingus starts playing, I should say. On this day starts playing. Metalingus starts playing by the Altar Bridge. I'm down with the kids from 2004. But yeah, that starts playing there. Great entrance there. Edge won a really, really, really good match after 21 minutes with the Bulldog choke. Really good stuff there. Didn't outstay its welcome like Edge's match with Randy Orton, that ill-fated one at WrestleMania did, which went on for way too long. This one was pitch perfect. Two great workers, fantastic match, no complaints there. We also saw Brock Lesnar come back after 18 months as he appeared after Roman Reigns retained his Universal title against John Cena in a match that was better on paper than it was in practice, because by this point, I don't know if you remember the WrestleMania from 2022, so the WrestleMania after this show, but John Cena was really starting to show that his back was causing him issues. Especially, I'll never forget the sight of him walking back up the ramp after his defeat to Austin Theory at WrestleMania a few months after this show. Got an itchy nose again. The pollen's going mad in here. But he's walking up the ramp and his back, like, obviously, normally your back's like that angle. His back was like that angle. He was just walking up this, like, obviously the years have taken its toll on his body. And it was really evident here in this match against Roman Reigns. And obviously coupling that with the newly minted Tribal Chief in 2021 sort of times. Roman was a lot of posturing, a lot of chatting about, a lot of just, like, slowing things down and aura farming, if you want. So you couple that with Cena's aging body and Roman's new style, I guess, compared to what he was doing in the years prior. It really took back from the match, and it wasn't quite as good as you might have thought it was on paper. Becky Lynch also made a return, just like Brock Lesnar, after becoming a mother. Remember that promo from the pandemic? I'm away home to become a mother. Here you go, Asuka. All the best to you. But she defeats the SmackDown Women's Champion, Bianca Belair, in 26 seconds. Now, I remember being so angry at that result because this was a match that everyone was gagging to see. But WWE, fair play to them. It's always a thing. Wait and see how it plays out. And they played the long game with this feud. They would have a great match at Extreme Rules, then an even better one at WrestleMania 38. So eating poo in terms of this 26-second victory for Becky Lynch. You're going, oh, shucks. I was looking forward to that, and they didn't deliver. It paid off by the end of the feud. Goldberg and Bobby Lashley had a match where Goldberg's son tried to get involved. So yeah, we're all shouting, it serves you right, Gage Berg, get back in the crowd, you little prick. But Bobby Lashley, he full Nelsoned him to bollocks. It was an absolutely fantastic moment. But Bobby did retain his title, his WWE title in this match here against Goldberg. After referee stoppage, the SummerSlam bollocks ending comes back again because Goldberg hurt his leg, and he hurt his leg so bad he couldn't continue. Then Bob is attacking Bill with a chair. That's when Gage Berg gets in there. Then MVP with a lovely little promo at the end saying there is no way that Bobby Lashley could have known that was the son of Goldberg who attacked him from behind, because Gage Berg just sort of hops on the back of Bobby Lashley and tries to choke him out, and then Bob's just like, ah, ah. That's a full Nelson. Ah. Oh, I don't know how you lock it on. I'm not a fighter. I'm a lover. Sheamus versus Damian Priest for the US title was a fun match between two big boys. Even if it was a little bit forgettable, because I said that match then, you're like, oh, Christ, that happened there, did it? But it was a good time, I thought. While RK Bro beating AJ Styles and Omos for the Raw Tag Team titles was a crowd-popping moment as well. Obviously, the tag team titles at that point weren't as down as they are now, but they were still pretty down at that point. Not a bad SummerSlam. There was not, like, any moments where we're like, what were we thinking with that kind of booking there, like there has been in SummerSlams of old on this tier list. But it was a 10-match card, and that 10-match card included Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair, 26 seconds. I know it aged well by the end of the feud, but I'm judging this card as a one-night-only thing in a vacuum. So yeah, Rollins and Edge aside, the rest of it just did not stand nor deliver. So I'm going to go 2021 in just about bearable. Is that a bit harsh? Certainly not bin-worthy, but I don't think it deserves to go any higher than that. You tell me what I've done wrong, if you dare. SummerSlam 2022 now, the one with the tractor. Now, this was much more like it as the Triple H reign in WWE was starting to get going following Vince McMahon's initial retirement from WWE. That was the 6-month thing. Then he came back with whatever executive title before he was gone. Once again, there was something different feeling about this SummerSlam in 2022. The matches were longer. The tone was more serious. It was fantastic. And that would last, to be fair, to Triple H and WWE. I thought anyway, throughout 2022, all of 2023, most of 2024, before Netflix happened, something changed behind the scenes, and I don't think they've recovered since. But that's a topic for another day. Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair, as I mentioned in last year's tier list entry, the 2021 event review. They tied up their year-long feud with a great match that ended with the face turn of Becky Lynch and the debut of Damage Control as Bayley brought Io Sky up from NXT. Can you believe that? 2022. And that's when she got promoted to the main roster, or as I like to say, moved adjacently to the main roster. And Dakota Kai, Bayley brought her back in kayfabe, back to the company, back to WWE after she was released. Previously, Logan Paul and The Miz had their WrestleMania rematch, and once again, to be fair to the lads, they delivered. This was still during the period of time where most of us were like, bloody hell, that Logan Paul is a dick, but he's taken to this wrestling stuff effortlessly, and it makes you sick. But didn't he do well? Pat McAfee and Baron Corbin had a good match as well, all things considered, as did the Mysterios taking on Judgment Day, featuring Edge. And we all know how that storyline panned out by the time we got to Cardiff, Wales, in a couple of months after this SummerSlam, with Dom hoofing people in the nads and Dirty Dom becoming a thing. Jeff Jarrett, old Double J, J-A-double-R, hey, double hey. That's the worst Jeff Jarrett impersonation of all time. He was the special guest referee for the Usos versus Street Profits because this show was in Tennessee, and as you would expect with those two teams involved there, it was another nice time as well. But the show wasn't all that good, as the 8-match card featured a couple of bad bouts, including Ronda Rousey versus Liv Morgan, which was tarnished by a dodgy finish as Morgan tapped out, while Ronda Rousey's shoulders were on the mat, allowing Liv to retain because the referee basically... he had rubbish eyesight. That was basically it. And then we saw Bobby Lashley and Austin Theory. I'm just laughing because in 2022, we had Austin Theory like, he's going to be a main event guy. He's the next John Cena. He's the next big breakout star. And he just proved month after month after month that he just wasn't that guy. This match between Bobby Lashley and Austin Theory for the US title went less than 5 minutes, which tells you all you need to know. And still here, in my humble opinion, in 2026, Austin Theory is nowhere near a top guy. They can put all the pretty ladies they want on his arm, but it's not going to happen. And that is something you can take to the bank. But on this show, I think the good far outweighed the bad. But the best thing on the card, I think, the best thing on the card, it's a moment we'll all remember. Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns in the last match, Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns in the main event in a last man standing match, the 6th and last pay-per-view match between the pair. So it's 10-year history over 7 years? 7 years? 6 or 7 years. I'm not doing that thing. But this one is remembered for the moment where Farmer Brock drove a tractor down the aisle, lifted the corner of the ring, and sent Roman Reigns spiraling, scrambling, tremendous back bump across the raised ring from the raised end all the way down to the floor. A fantastic bump from Roman Reigns. This is also where Theory cashed in but failed. Lol. I'm sounding like I've got something against Theory. I just don't believe he's the guy that the company maybe thinks he is. I just think he's very bland and generic, and there's a million Austin Theories out there who could do that role. But anyway, what do I know about wrestling? Bugger all. What I do know is, though, that was one hell of a SummerSlam moment. I think we're looking top of lovely, bottom of the best. I'll go top of lovely. I think SummerSlam 2022 is a very, very, very solid card with a memorable moment to end it. And also, Dakota Kai and Io Sky forming Damage Control. The company got great legs out of that gimmick. There's a lot to like about 2022. So yes, lovely. I'm happy with that. SummerSlam 2023 now, the one with tribal combat. This is an underrated show for my money because of that old Vince McMahon adage of the people remember the thing they see last the most. And the last thing they saw on this card wasn't the best, as we saw Jey Uso and Roman Reigns do battle in tribal combat. It was too slow. There was too much drama, but not in a good way like they did in Hell in a Cell 2020. That was so effective. This was just like, crack on, lads. Come on, wrestle each other. There's so much story here, and you're going, you're in my family, but I'm the family leader. Because we were recognizing the tribal chief with the winner of this match here. That was the entire crux of the feud by this point. And the stipulation for the match clearly said no interference because Bloodline, and we know how many Bloodline members there are, obviously less back then compared to what there are now, but still, there was a fair few all the same, but mainly due to Solo Sikoa, that rule was just forgotten about, which was very, very strange. And then we see the finish, which is where I believe the Bloodline stuff started to potentially jump the shark, because Jimmy Uso turned on his brother, even though it was Jimmy Uso who was the first of the twins to turn against Roman Reigns. So Jimmy Uso went full circle there, and we're starting to go, wait there, he did that, now he's gone and done that. That doesn't quite make sense. As I say, it might be where the Bloodline stuff started to jump the shark in the opinion of some. Mine being one of them. Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler had an MMA rules match at SummerSlam 2023, which, outside of blood sport, they rarely ever work. Like, as much as a fan of NXT that I am, when they go underground, I always think it looks really hokey and really naff. So they were never, ever going to do good stuff here, because it rarely ever works, does it, in professional wrestling, where we do the worked shoot kind of stuff. And, of course, by this point in 2023, it was clear that Ronda Rousey wasn't here for a long time when it comes to the wrestling. She hated wrestling fans famously in interviews that she did. She didn't have that same, like, wow, look at her go, as she had in her first couple of years with the WWE after her time in the Octagon. So yeah, bye Felicia is all we've got to say about that one. But those two matches aside, this was a good show, because this is where we saw Brock Lesnar unexpectedly put over Cody Rhodes and then show respect after the bell. Logan Paul and Ricochet had a very enjoyable match. LA Knight won a Slim Jim Battle Royal, which went down very well with the live crowd, I should say. And the sponsorship thing wasn't too bad there, because it was like, LA Knight's a new macho man. Slap into a Slim Jim. Slap into a Slim Jim. Slap an old pensioner with a Slim Jim. Gunther and Drew McIntyre hit each other very, very hard for nearly 14 minutes for another good time. And Seth Rollins and Finn Balor rolled the clock all the way back for an excellent showpiece of a match. Just, here's good wrestlers. Let's let them wrestle for a little while there. On top of all that, Bianca Belair versus Charlotte Flair versus Asuka for the WWE Women's title was also a great semi-main event triple threat match, with the cherry on top of the cake being Io Sky cashing in on Belair post-match. A good bit of business all round there. So yes, there was a couple of duds that we spoke about towards the start there, one of which was the main event. So again, it's one of those, how much does the last thing you saw drag down this show in your estimation? But I think there's a lot to like about SummerSlam 2023. I think it's on par with 2022, but we'll put it near the bottom because I can't work. I think 2022 is better than 2023. Yes. God, it's getting hard now to remember everything. Yes. 2022 better than 2023, but I don't know where 2023 comes in the pantheon of all those matches that are lovely, lovely, lovely in this tier list here, but I do think it's a lovely, lovely, lovely show. SummerSlam 2024 now, the one with Liv and Dom getting it on. Yes, this was the last one-night SummerSlam. Oh, how I miss you so. Those two-nighters twice now have been proven to not be worthy of a SummerSlam. Or not yet. They should be saved for WrestleMania and WrestleMania alone. That makes sense for 2 nights. Every other big premium live event should be 1 night in my humble opinion, but I do recognize they probably make a boatload more money by doing 2 nights. But in terms of a consumer watching the show, they do have to pad the cards out, don't they? And that's been proven 2 years in a row now at SummerSlam. More on that in a little bit. This was the scene of CM Punk's first singles match back in WWE. His first big pay-per-view singles match in 10 years. 10 years, 11 years, 10 and a half years, something like that. He would take on Drew McIntyre in a feud that had been built up so well in the face of CM Punk being broken with an injury suffered at the Royal Rumble. However, the match did not deliver despite what came before the match. It was a wonder. You almost believed it was real. I prayed for this to happen, said Drew McIntyre, who was on fire with the microphone in hand in 2024. But WWE, for some reason, had to try and be a bit too clever for their own good, in my opinion, and made Seth Rollins the special guest referee, and I thought he took away from it. I think fans watching that show just wanted to see CM Punk and Drew McIntyre basically thrown in a pit, and the first man out survives. The last man in there gets eaten by a tiger after he's been beaten up by his opponent. That kind of thing. But they tried to Tried to be a bit too clever, and it didn't pay off for me. Solo Sikoa got a SummerSlam main event and proved that at that time, at least, he was not that guy as the silent bodyguard with funny little gloves and a lovely suit but velveteen shoes kind of thing, like the cat from WCW in terms of his drip. He took on Cody Rhodes in a Bloodline Rules match. Just about half an hour this one clocked in at, and by the time Roman Reigns returned to Costa on the night, people were gagging for something like that to happen, which is never a sign of a good match. Who knows if they let that little silly goose Solo Sikoa be himself a little bit more, like they did so famously with Roman Reigns heading into 2021 and 2022 and there on out. Maybe you get another SummerSlam main event down the line, it'll prove you'll belong, because he's such a charismatic... He's not a serious guy, is he? He's just a silly goose. I'm Solo Sikoa, and I turn all flumpy when I get all silly. That's a confectionery in the UK here. It looks like a big dildo, a big floppy dildo, but it's a lovely marshmallow treat. What am I saying here now? The best match of the night was the World Heavyweight title match between Damian Priest and Gunther, because they're both big and they're both good. And Priest isn't stuck in a tag team with R-Truth and visibly sick of his life like he is these days on SmackDown. This is the match where Finn Balor was told to stay backstage by Damian Priest, but Finn came out to the ring anyway. Initially, he's cheering his Judgment Day boy on before he turns on him by draping Gunther's foot on the rope when it looked like Damian Priest was going to win. Then soon after that, Damian Priest was told to be gone by the Judgment Day as they fell apart kind of for the first time. They're still going strong though. They're still going strong. They just look a little bit different. Braun Breaker won the IC title in a glorified... He won the Intercontinental Championship match in a glorified squash match of Sami Zayn. Sami taking a right good whooping there, which I'm sure if he did that in 2026 would go down very, very well indeed. LA Knight defeated Logan Paul to become United States Champion in a fun match that was dragged down a bit by Machine Gun Kelly. Again, celebrities getting involved. They'll never learn, will they? When someone just flashes their ankle bone and like, oh my God, you're famous in another field. Come on over here. We're gagging for all the attention. And it's never really used properly, is it? Outside of Bad Bunny. Outside of Jelly Roll's promo to Randy Orton ahead of WrestleMania this year. You've already beat this version of yourself, Randy. You've overcome this, Randy. I'm the conscience of WWE. I'm Jelly Roll. I don't mean that, but that promo was good from Jelly Roll. Anyway, Nia Jax and Bayley didn't have a good match at all as Jax won the WWE Women's Championship, but the show is probably most remembered for the opening match of the, I think it was the entire weekend, was it? One of the cards. God, it comes a bit convoluted when it's 2 nights. Is it 2 nights? No, this is the last one night. I tell you, we've been here for so long, I've forgotten what I said at the start of this point. Never mind what I said earlier on in the video. Yes, it was a 1 night. This was the opening match of the card and probably the most remembered thing on it. Dom Mysterio revealed he'd been cheating on Rhea Ripley with Liv Morgan as he left his old girlfriend in the dust and headed off for pastures new with Liv Morgan and her sparkly title belt. So yes, a couple of the bigger matches on the card did not deliver and live up to their hype, and nothing much else stood out. Not a bad show by any stretch of the imagination, but not a memorable one either, apart from Liv and Dom getting together. I was like, what's this man doing? An embarrassment of riches. What's he got that I don't have, apart from a mullet and a mustache and a bank account with lots of money in? And a famous father. He's got lots going on as Dom. Wonderful hair. Anyway, I think it's somewhere in the middle. I don't think it's just about bearable. I think bottom of all right is just about fine for SummerSlam. Whoops. 2024. SummerSlam 2025, the one with Rollins and his crutches. The first ever 2-night SummerSlam, which proved that SummerSlam does not need to be 2 nights in terms of quality of the card. Imagine taking both cards, mushing them into one, getting rid of the filler, keeping the good stuff. A better time is had by all apart from the accountants who didn't get to sell twice as many beers or twice as many hot dogs over the weekend. However, it is fair to say that each of the main events of both nights were the best matches WWE might have put on in recent memory. That's how highly I rate these matches. CM Punk survived 30 minutes of Gunther to retain his World Heavyweight title, but then Seth Rollins fooled the world. The knee injury that never was. The crutches came down in time with the music and the Tron. It was a hell of a moment. Rollins and Lynch and Rue, little Rue, their sweet baby child. They did so well to keep that under wraps. Obviously made great content for WWE Unreal as well. But yeah, Rollins goes down to the ring and he takes the title via Money in the Bank cash in. A tremendous match followed up by a tremendous angle. I felt refreshed being worked again for the first time in a while, because obviously being in this job, being on social media, you see all the spoilers now before the show, but this one was a complete shock, and up the lads for doing so. 2 nights before this show, John Cena turned babyface again, because that heel run, which started off so well with the turn in the early shows and all the reaction he was getting. I remember the show in Brussels with the kid going wild. Started off so well, but it petered out so tragically, horribly, badly. Oh, it was... The heel run by the end was horrible. So they turned him babyface just before SummerSlam, and him and Cody Rhodes, that's John Cena, pronouns, pal. John Cena and Cody Rhodes basically did at SummerSlam what they should have done at WrestleMania a few months prior. And I tell you what, they didn't even need Travis Scott to produce a great match. Who'd have thought it, eh? Who'd have thought it? A record might have been set in this match, though, for finishes hit. It felt that way. I've just made that up, by the way. That start, I don't know what the record is for finishes hit in one match, but it felt like it could have been, if any match, this match here. I just like the way it went from convoluted bollocks involving Travis Scott and The Rock. The Rock missing at this point as well. I mean, that didn't add to the story at all either, did it? But the way it ended, just a proper straight-up wrestling match between the pair. A good time had by the fans, enjoying what they're watching. And there was the definitive, like, he is the new me. Cody Rhodes is the new John Cena. That's the guy. I'm off soon, but not yet. But that's the new guy. I like the way it was done. A good bit of business there. But then things were somewhat marred as Brock Lesnar returned to attack John Cena after the match, after being on hiatus from the company since SummerSlam in 2023, after he was named in the Vince McMahon trafficking scandal. As fans were left asking, like, what changed? Like, why come back now compared to being gone from the company for a couple of years, or over a year, I should say, at that point. WWE knew this was a problem, so they cancelled their post-show press conference. He must have been cleared. I don't know what it is. Let me know in the comments down below. But yeah, something must have changed for him to bring him back. Obviously, he's now retired. But Lesnar came back, and it was controversial at the time, to say the very least. The undercard across both nights of SummerSlam was very, very mixed indeed. Strong outings included the triple threat to open night 2 of Naomi versus Io Sky versus Rhea Ripley for the women's world title, and the TLC match that followed that match as well, with the 6 teams who... They were shafted at WrestleMania, but this was like, sorry, we didn't put you on that card. We'll put you on the big party of the summer instead. Roman Reigns and Jey Uso versus Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed was also fine, if a bit long. It went on a bit long. It wasn't quite memorable, but it was a very, very decent time indeed. Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss won the women's tag team titles. Was a nice moment, even if their friendship looked very, very plastic at this stage still. They've got there now, I think, just about. But my God, that chapter 1 where they were like, oh, we're the unlikely couple. That went on for so long, and it was continuing on here. So, yeah, they won the titles. It was nice, but I'm glad they've developed that storyline a bit on now, as they should have done over a year later. The no DQ feud ender between Becky Lynch and Lyra Valkyria was a little bit of a mess, with one moment in particular seeing Lyra's hands that were in a zip tie coming free, then the camera picks her up, putting her back in. That was a massive shame, that, because it was obviously... a nice idea. Shame about the execution, as they used to say on Pro Evolution Soccer back in the day. Obviously, they made a thing about it on Unreal as well. And was it Series 2? I've not watched the newest series. I don't want to be lied to again. It's just a new kayfabe, isn't it? Aha, we got them. Oh, well, we didn't get them, but we'll pretend we did. It's a load of bollocks, isn't it? But anyway, it's a shame that match went awry like it did. The bad stuff on this card was bad, as you would expect, and it was clear that WWE did some padding over the 2 nights where we had like an unmemorable. It wasn't a memorable cage match between Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu. Tiffany versus Jade wasn't the best. Jelly Roll and Randy Orton versus Drew McIntyre and Logan Paul. That was a thing that happened. It was all right, I guess, but it wasn't anything I'm going to write home about to my mother. You should check out Jelly Roll, ma'am. Jesus Christ. Certainly a weaker card in the grand scheme of things, but it popped up 2 very, very good matches, so it can't be too low down. To 2025, I am going to put in the bottom of all right. That seems fine, because those 2 tentpole matches were that good. Rest of the card, but those 2 matches, up the cowards. Right then, we've entered the final stretch, SummerSlam 2026, the one with Brock Lesnar's retirement. That's the end of the Friends titles for these SummerSlam tier list entries. Anyway, another advert, just like the year prior for SummerSlam not being a 2-night affair. That's 2 for 2 currently. Just save Mania. as a 2-night show. The rest of them just have to be one night. As a consumer, watching the product, want to have a good time, it doesn't need to be two nights. It doesn't need to be 2 cards. Because if we look at both cards, I thought the 6-man tag and the 6-woman tag for night 1 just aren't pay-per-view caliber matches. The men's match was a very, very good time. The lads delivered in the match. There were 6 big lumps just battering each other. A highlight of the match for me was the Royce Keys power slam over the barricade to Jacob Fatu. I thought the match was very, very good, but it didn't feel like a pay-per-view billing, if that makes any kind of sense, even though these 6 lads have been intertwined on TV for a long time. LA Knight getting the win. Looks like he's going to get a push, and that's a very, very good thing. And on the women's match that didn't belong on this show, it was a shame about Brie Bella's injury. JC Jane does the old senton into the stairs. Brie Bella hurts her shoulder. It stopped the match from being what it might have been otherwise, but still, that one didn't feel like it was pay-per-view billing worthy, if that makes any kind of sense. And obviously we have the moment of the turn at the end there. You go back and watch WrestleMania. Nikki Bella's promo, she literally says, I called an old friend. Then you fast forward to SummerSlam. Paige obviously eats the fall to lose the match for Team Bella, if you want to call it that. Team Bella and Paige. And then obviously the heel turn happens because of that, because they're sick of Paige losing matches and all that stuff. And then Nikki Bella's shouting down the camera, "You take my spot." Well, this is what happens. You were injured and called a favor from an old friend. Calm the bollocks down. We remember these things, Nikki Bella and the WWE. Elsewhere, Baron Corbin got what is, at the moment for me anyway, a baffling win against Trick Williams. As things stand, I'm sat here recording this on the 5th of August. Trick can't move up the card at the moment because those spots are full, as we'll get onto a little bit later. And Baron Corbin's return hasn't wielded any noise from the crowd whatsoever yet. So to see him beating a really popular up-and-comer like Trick, when Trick can't go to the next level, because US title, the next level, that's the world title, but the spots are full at the moment, so where's Trick going to go? I don't know. I just thought it was a bit weird to see someone coming back like Baron Corbin and beating someone like Trick Willie, who he has kind of cooled off over the last month or 2 maybe, but still he's got a lot of popularity behind him. I thought this was a weird bit of booking. Anyway, Danhausen and Dom Mysterio should have been a lot more silly than it was. You've got $100,000 of human monies on a pole match. That should be absolute bollocks. It's done my head in watching people going like, wow, this won't get 5 stars. It was never ever going to get 5 stars. We're on a pole. Human monies. It's stupid. It's Danhausen and Dom Mysterio. I know Dom deserves a lot better, but this is Danhausen's wheelhouse. You've got to expect certain things when certain things are laid out in front of you. And what we got here was that, but I thought they could have gone so much further. I thought the high spots of the match should have been a lot more than El Torito Hausen doing what he was doing and the other little Hausens running around the ring and Joe Hendry wielding a guitar. I thought they didn't put all that they could have done into this match here. And it also made a mockery of the something on a pole match, because when it's revealed at the end of the match, Danhausen wins it, obviously. He's whapping the money out the bag. It's a mixture of $1 bills and then also the kind of the Danhausen currency that they're selling as well. There's no way there's $100,000 of human monies in there, unless, of course, that's what Danhausen's currency is called. So it made a mockery of the something on a pole match. Judy Bagwell didn't stand on a big forklift for ages for this bollocks to be happening. So that was a bad thing as well. Aside from that, I thought SummerSlam 2026 was littered with good stuff, which is why the argument's made, mesh them together for one night of fantastic wrestling instead of 2 nights where the good stuff is split 50-50. Chelsea Green made WWE Unreal look absolutely pointless by winning the interim women's championship in a ladder match. That won't go down as one of the greats, but I still thought it had enough high spots to be a very, very good watch, like Tiffany Stratton especially taking death-defying things where Jade Cargill actually catches her, because normally people don't catch Tiffany Stratton when she does that kind of thing. So up to Jade Cargill for catching her. So I thought that was a very, very good match with a very, very, very satisfying ending. Down with the WWE Unreal. Liv Morgan and Io Sky delivered in that match, but it felt a bit short to me, which I thought was a theme all the way through SummerSlam 2026. Of course, we've got to jamming all those adverts, for goodness sakes. But it was still very, very good, considering as well this was Liv's first title defense since winning at WrestleMania. Maybe because of that it exceeded expectations, because you'd think that maybe Liv would be a little bit rusty. I know she did Queen of the Ring and stuff like that, but she's definitely out of match practice. Cody Rhodes and CM Punk had a half-an-hour humper of a match, complete with CM Punk paying tribute to Terry Funk with a very wonky moonsault. I thought that was fantastic, nailed to perfection. I don't want to see people saying that was a bad moonsault. That wasn't a bad moonsault. That was a Terry Funk moonsault. I thought it was fantastic. And of course, we got Randy Orton coming back as part of that match where he winked at the camera and disappeared, just like Santa Claus. I thought that was a good time as well. Nick Aldis, fantastic outing here, complete with Oasis entrance. Absolutely brilliant stuff. That to me was the telltale sign it's a one-match thing and done. Because I think if they were going to use him for more than one match, he definitely gets a Def Rebel theme. God save all this. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. Bow, bow. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. Bow, bow. You know what Def Rebel theme goes at the start, don't you? Anyway, he looked the part in there against Gunther. He was never, ever going to win, considering he was the GM for a long time. He hasn't had a match for 3 years, and he was wrestling the bloke who retired John Cena, Goldberg, and AJ Styles, but he still had a great underdog outing, and I thought the crowd were with him. Obviously, the Chris Van Vliet interview helped things as well with the tears. Like, this is how much this moment means to him. There was a run in there for sure for Nick Aldis, I thought, but it looks like he's gone back to his desk job, and he's not going to do that, so I don't know. What do I know? Nothing, but a good match all the same. Ober and Brock, I thought was a fantastic time. They did not need to be inside Hell in a Cell because they didn't use the cell at all. I get the visual of like, oh, they're locked in a cage and they won't go anywhere. But apart from like the Raw before SummerSlam, nobody did run away. Like Lesnar locked Ober in the cage to do the weigh-in. He stayed on the ramp. That's about as much as we saw, apart from like in the build to WrestleMania where Lesnar was doubting himself, but that's a long time ago, and Lesnar won a match since then, so I don't think the Hell in a Cell was needed. A great visual, and we know what Hell in a Cell means. I thought there was something missing from a normal Hell in a Cell match because all they did with the cage was one Irish whip, I think it was Ober to Brock. Then one of them went through a table stacked up on the outside of the ring, sort of propped up against the wall of the cage. A little missed. Oh, I'm getting old, I think. I'm getting old because I see Ober eating 3 F5s and then the tombstone on the exposed ring boards. And I know that Ober's the ruler, and you go back to when Ober debuted in NXT and watch the podcast adjacent to that episode of NXT. I've been Ober Femi pilled since day one, let me tell you, because how big he is. But for me, Hell in a Cell, Brock Lesnar, 3 F5s, tombstone on exposed ring boards. He got up too quickly. I want to see more selling. I want to feel the struggle, because that would make you struggle no matter who you are. You could be Alan Shearer himself and take all those moves and still struggle. So I thought that was a little bit of a low point there. Maybe the length as well was a little bit short, but then what can Lesnar do? Obviously, he's retired now, as we know. Maybe that was all that he had. I don't know. But I thought there was a little bit something missing from that match, as good as it was. Like Lesnar, fantastic job putting over Ober. Obviously, the promo after the match as well. This is the future. I am the past. That was as clear can be. Good bit of business. All the boxes ticked, maybe apart from a bit of selling and maybe length in the match and use of the cell. But those are little nitpicky things. Shout out to Chad Gable, who probably had the best pure, like from a straight up wrestling perspective, performance of the weekend, where he won the IC title from Penta in a match that went just over 11 minutes. And I thought that was short, considering obviously this has been going on for a while. I think it was Chad's 6th challenge at the IC title. We have the storyline with him being frustrated with luchadors, then turning racist against the luchadors, then becoming a luchador himself to understand the lucha libre culture, to defeat the lucha libres, infiltrate from the outside to go in there and take them all down. Then the redemption arc, obviously the match against El Grande Americano at AAA. I thought it should have been 25 minutes. I thought him and Penta could have been doing that kind of match. I thought what we got was a little bit short for the story they had told. Hello, it's Ross from the future with some horrible news. The final video file was a little bit buggered, so basically it's going to turn into a radio broadcast from here on out, and what you'll see is whatever the deranged mind of one Sam Driver has produced, so enjoy looking at whatever Sam has made while listening to me continue to talk about every single SummerSlam of all time. So yes, Chad's done it. The redemption arc is complete. He's got the respect of luchadores around the world. He's got the IC title he's been challenging for years. At this point, but they had to turn what was an organically fantastic moment. Like, you're feeling it with Chad Gable. His family's in the ring. He's finally done it. We've been there along with him for the ride. It's organic. It's rare today to get this kind of feeling watching someone do the wrestling. Chad sold the moment so well. The tears, like he's won the Olympic gold medal, for goodness sakes. Then a bloke in a dog costume gets on the apron like he's a member of Chad Gable's family, which he clearly wasn't. Then he hands Chad Gable a couple of sponsors' drinks. WWE has lost its feeling and its soul, and that moment there rubber stamped that. Every single moment, organic or manufactured. This one was a bit of both, obviously manufactured because Chad Gable, long storyline, won the title, but organic in the reaction to it, and Chad Gable, the outpouring of emotion. You could tell it was just real to him, like he's done this thing, a big achievement, and it's got to have that attached to it. I thought that was an absolute travesty. I thought it was really undermined. what could have been a great moment, but now all we're talking about is a stupid dick in a dog costume. Anyway, less about that. And then the Shield Law was wrapped up here as Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins finally had their big pay-per-view match together in 2026, which was won. I should say that in the context of the finally bit of that sentence there. Roman Reigns finally beat Seth Rollins in their big pay-per-view match. The near falls were thrilling, but for me, there was too much posturing, too much like movie speak between the two that didn't slow the match down in terms of like, let's let the crowd calm down after a high spot just to bring them back up again with all their energy and not to just have them like up there all the time. I thought it was more like a speed bump that you had to sort of fight to get over before the action got going again. It was a weirdly paced match for me. I didn't quite enjoy it like I thought I would do. But yes, the action when they were going for it, not doing like the, hey, I own you, and oh, well, I'm the tribal chief and I actually own... That sort of stuff. Once you got past that, a very, very good match between two of the biggest stars in the game today. But the headline news for me was Kevin Owens finally making his big return. The first time he's wrestled since March the 1st, 2025. Firstly, poor old Finn Balor. He did not deserve to have two men added to his number one contenders match against Sami Zayn based off what Finn Balor has done on SmackDown. Sami Zayn, let's laugh at him. He's a prick. Fantastic stuff. But not Finn. But I was a big fan of the way that they did it. Excuse me. Because, obviously, Gunther is brought out by Nick Aldis. Obviously, there's a lot of history there between Gunther and Nick Aldis. Gunther was... Well, he beat Nick Aldis on night one of SummerSlam. So that kind of makes sense in the context of like, well, we've got to check it past. I'm now the general manager again, even though I probably should be a wrestler for a little bit. I'm Nick Aldis. Let's just, start again fresh. Show that I'm not going to be sour about my defeat. Show that what's happened earlier on, there's no ill feeling towards it. Let's just let Gunther go out there and wrestle a match and see if he wins. And if he does win, fair play. If he doesn't, he can't say I've not given him the chance. I thought that made sense. And I don't want to say we're verging on, do you remember when Charlotte Flair was wheeled out for the Ronda Rousey and Becky Lynch WrestleMania match, and Vince McMahon was just like, we are going to put her in the match for no reason whatsoever. Here's Charlotte Flair. She's just wheeled out there and put in the match when people want to see Ronda and Becky and nobody else, but Charlotte was put in there. And that hampered Charlotte, and that's not Charlotte's fault. That's just her being misused. I'm not saying Gunther's there, but I did have a little feeling of like, oh God, here's Gunther again. But I thought the way that was done initially was a bit like, oh... But then what happened next with Kevin Owens coming out was the old... it wasn't a bait and switch, was it? It was a bait and here's Kevin Owens. Brilliant stuff. Great to see him back. He looked like he's not lost a step, which is miraculous when you consider the injury he had, the time he spent on the sidelines, the age that he's 42 now. He's 42. He's been wrestling for over 25 years, there and thereabouts. Fantastic outing, fantastic result. Over the moon to see Kevin Owens back once again. It's a weird one to place because I think WWE personally has been a tad boring for a while now. The show wasn't bad, but it certainly didn't hit the heights of previous SummerSlams. But it's almost like the last 2 years of WWE pay-per-views makes this show seem a bit better than it actually is. So where do we put it? Where do we put it? Where do we put it? I think bottom of lovely, lovely, lovely. That might be a little bit too generous, but I'll go for bottom of lovely, lovely, lovely. My God, my voice is shot. I am never going to do a tier list of this length as a one-man show ever again. But thank you very much for watching. I've been Gary YouTube from Cultaholic Wrestling. Once again, reminder, live stream come to our Patreon at patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can tell me what I've got wrong here. This is just my opinion. I could be woefully wrong. Opinions are like bum holes. Everyone's got one, and they stink. What does yours smell like? So we'll look at the top tier, of course. Finally, we've got 92, 98, 2000, 01, 02, 2014, 2013 as well. A little bit further down. The bottom of the top tier is 2013, and my personal preference, this is what it comes down to. I used to give the co-host this responsibility. I firmly believe the greatest SummerSlam of all time is 2002. Up the Shawn Michaels and Triple H and Jim Ross on the call. So there you go. If you disagree with that, I'll see you at patreon.com/Cultaholic in the not too distant future, where you can shout at me.